Chapter 1476. Blood Flag narrowed his eyes, his expression still light, as he said, "Jiang Qingzi, the you today are a bit disappointing." Across from him, Jiang Qingzi stood there in his armor. His aura rose around him, as if he were a god descending from the heavens. Blood Flag, even with your status, you still need to consider the consequences of trying to kill a conferred border army troop in the capital region. Blood Flag's lips curved up in a mocking smile. It seems that I've left the border army for far too long, so much so that you have a vague impression of me. If I didn't dare to attack you, would I have appeared here? As he spoke the last word, he stepped forwards. The chairs around him, including the tea set, were instantly shattered by a powerful strength, turning into a tumbling fog of blood. A mournful wail sounded out, emitting the endless despair and pain of a life before death. It was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Ruthless killing intent was like a long river that had burst its banks, roaring and sweeping in all directions with a rumbling sound. But when it was less than 100 feet away, it was twisted by an invisible strength. It gathered together and fused together with the blood fog, turning into a giant blood saber that slashed down. There was no sound as it broke through the air. This was because beneath this saber, the concept of space had been lost. It appeared it cut down. It was already right in front of them. Jiang Qingzi's pupils shrank. With a loud shout, he punched out. His metal-covered fist collided with the blood-red saber. In the next moment, with a heaven-shaking explosion, it was like a bolt of thunder had exploded, forming a terrifying shockwave visible to the naked eye. It swept outwards in a ring shape, instantly destroying the incomparably hard and broad road. Wherever it went, dust would rise into the skies. Facing Blood Flag / the old general didn't fall into a disadvantage. At least on the surface, he was still awe-inspiring, like a heavenly god descending to the mortal world. But at this time, Jiang Qingzi's complexion changed, revealing a look of anger. "You actually succeeded. Baiyu, run." His shout was supported by his powerful cultivation. It instantly drilled into the ears of true Saint Baiyu, who was pulling Qinyu and shooting towards the imperial capital. His complexion paled. With his status, he naturally knew of Blood Flag's ominous reputation. It was because of this that he felt even more terrified. This was because he was a madman. Once he went crazy, he was a terrifying character without any scruples. It was precisely because of this that Blood Flag was transferred back from the border army and suppressed in the imperial capital to sharpen its temperament. If it wasn't for that, he would have already become one of the new giants in the Empire's military and a real big shot in the West Wilderness. Therefore, before he escaped, Jiang Qingzi reminded him to prioritize his own safety. He must have predicted this moment. Right at this moment, a huge force suddenly exploded and forcefully pulled True Sage Baitu to a stop. Baisu, who was filled with shock and anger, desperately trying to rush into the imperial capital, felt the soreness in his bones as they groaned. His face immediately turned green. He angrily glared at Qinyu, just as he was about to ask him what he wanted to do. His body trembled in the next moment, and endless anger filled his eyes. A blood-red vortex suddenly appeared in the direction the two of them were heading. As it rotated, it looked like a bloody mouth. From this whirlpool, True Sage Baitu could feel a cold and violent killing intent. At this moment, his hair stood on end. If it weren't for Qinyu sensing something and forcefully stopping them, they feared they would have already drilled in. Although he didn't know what this vortex was, he didn't need to be a genius to know that once they were swallowed in, the consequences wouldn't be good. Although he already knew that Blood Flag was a madman, when he truly determined that Blood Flag didn't hesitate to try and kill him, True Sage Baitu still felt a terrible feeling. It was like a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head, causing his bones to ache from the cold. Pa! Pa! Clapping his hands, Blood Flag revealed a faint smile as he walked out from the blood vortex. Although his eyes were full of praise, there was a trace of disappointment on his face. He never thought that these two prey would be able to escape his trap. Dark ruler. Beneath the black robes, Chinyu lightly said, there is no past grievance or grudge between us. So why must you come to kill me? Blood Flag shook his head. It must not have been easy for you to reach your current cultivation. After experiencing so many storms, why ask such a stupid question? His eyes brightened and he exuded a shocking deterrent. In this world, why do you need so many reasons? I want to kill you, so I came. The black-robed figure fell silent. Chinyu frowned and sighed inwardly. Thinking about it from another perspective, if he were the one in the imperial capital who had the qualifications to compete for the throne, he would also firmly grasp the chance to eliminate Li Yizhou. So from the start, Chinyu was well aware that this person in front of him would kill him. The reason he spoke such nonsense was to judge his opponent's strength and prepare a response ahead of time. Unfortunately, the result wasn't too wonderful. The blood flag in front of him wasn't a ruler. Chinyu was certain of this. At his current level, he could faintly feel the impregnable shackles above his head. This was the gate leading to the ruler realm. The shackles above Blood Flag's head had become much thinner, and it seemed he would soon be able to break through them. But he was still restricted within. If it wasn't a ruler, then with Chinyu's current strength, he didn't need to fear it. But he felt an intense threat from Blood Flag. It was bloody and fatal. There were two possibilities for this. One was that Blood Flag had some extremely formidable trump card in his hands. Once he used it, he could instantly release a devastating strength. The second was that Blood Flag had other methods that could temporarily increase his strength and erupt with the might of a ruler. Chinyu was more inclined towards the second possibility. If he only had a single trump card, how could Blood Flag dare to be so arrogant? The only possible explanation was that he could use it repeatedly. Only this could explain why he had the confidence to dare to kill people in the capital regions. But even so, did Blood Flag not care about the imperial capital's investigation? After all, from True Saint Baiyu's expression, he could tell that stopping a border army soldier from killing people in the capital regions was clearly an extremely vile matter. He isn't afraid of being investigated. True Saint Baiyu's voice sounded out in Chinyu's ears. Blood Flag's background is a bit complicated. In short, you can understand it as the imperial military tolerates him, and this tolerance extends to the imperial palace. If we die today, we can only die in vain. So do you understand? We cannot die like this. Chinyu's eyebrows shot up. Even in this situation, Blood Flag still wasn't prepared to escape by himself. Even if he wanted to befriend Blood Flag, he had never heard of anyone willing to gamble with their own life. The corners of True Saint Baiyu's mouth twitched as if he had sensed the shock in the black-robed man's eyes. He gritted his teeth and growled. If I could escape alone, I would have done so without hesitation. However, it's too late now. The Blood Flag has locked onto us and sees us as its prey today. The Blood Flag has never let its prey go. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Behind them, loud explosions rang out from the intense battle, causing the earth to tremble slightly. Jiang Qingzi's opponent was Blood Flag, and Chinyu and True Saint Baiyu were also facing Blood Flag. Their auras were exactly the same, and the feeling of threat and terror they gave off was also exactly the same. Chinyu exclaimed in his heart. The desolate region was truly extraordinary. This was the first time he had seen such methods in his life. As for what True Saint Baiyu said, he didn't think too much about it. This wasn't because he had enough confidence in himself to deal with the Blood Flag's attack, but because when he sensed the blood vortex hidden in the nothingness from the very start, he was able to confirm the icy cold and cruel killing intent in the Blood Flag's heart. Blood Flag was strong. In fact, it was likely that he was even stronger than the ruler that had appeared at the Heavenspan Sword sect. But waiting for death wasn't Chinyu's style. Since he didn't want to wait for death, he could only fight with his life on the line. The only thing that left him a bit relieved was that, in his current state, Qin Yu had obtained the support of the Dark Emperor crown as well as the Eye of Darkness. His strength had risen dramatically. It was also because of this that even though he was frowning beneath his black robes, his eyes were still calm. Blood Flag could feel this calmness. The appreciation on his face deepened, but his eyes became even colder. They were like sharp and hard ice blades that wanted to pierce through Qin Yu and nail him to the ground. I originally thought that fighting with Jiang Qingzi would be my only harvest today, but I never imagined there would be such a pleasant surprise. This is good. Bang! The blood-red vortex suddenly exploded. Its speed rapidly rose, and a terrifying swallowing strength erupted from within. Qin Yu grabbed True, Saint Baiyu, and tossed him away. If this fellow died here, then even if the one who killed him was Blood Flag, he would still be in deep trouble. After all, today's attack was all because of him. Protecting True Saint Baiyu was the same as selling him and the influence behind him a favor to Qin Yu, who was like duckweed floating on water in the boundless western wilderness. There might be some unexpected harvests. Of course, the premise of all of this was that he could smoothly survive today. If he was killed here, whether or not True Saint Baiyu lived or died wouldn't matter at all. True Saint Baiyu stumbled to the ground, a look of shame on his face. It had to be known that just now he had thought about the possibility of escaping by himself. Hesitation flashed in his eyes. He took a deep breath and loudly said, "You must be careful. Blood Flag's most powerful technique is that he can control a person's mind." Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He took a step forwards. With a loud bang, the earth shattered and his feet sank into the ground up to his ankles. His black robes were pulled up by the swallowing strength, stretching as if they were cast from iron. He pointed straight in the direction of the blood-red vortex. With loud cracking sounds, cracks appeared beneath his feet. He couldn't stop it. Even if he continued to waste time, he would only lose more strength. In the end, he wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being swallowed up by the blood-red vortex. As Qin Yu reached this conclusion, a bit of hesitation flashed in his eyes, but as he took a deep breath, it turned into determination. Bang! With a loud explosion, he took another step forwards. But this time, he didn't want to resist the swallowing strength of the blood-red vortex. Rather, the moment he stepped forwards, he borrowed the strength of the shaking ground to rush forwards. His speed was so fast that he left behind afterimages as he submerged into the blood-red vortex. With his own strength combined with the terrifying swallowing strength of the blood-red vortex, his speed reached an unimaginable level. Qin Yu was like a boulder tumbling down from the summit of a mountain. The explosive impact caused the blood-red vortex to instantly distort and deform. Blood Flag paled. Interesting, but it is impossible for you to injure me with just a moment of courage. The only result for you is your own destruction. Rumble, rumble. After the blood-red vortex swallowed Qin Yu, it spun even faster, and the aura it emitted became increasingly wild. It was like a meat grinder running at full speed, enough to instantly tear apart an entire mountain. But at this time, a deep look of concentration appeared on Blood Flag's face, as if he had sensed something. In the next moment, a bit of darkness appeared deep within the blood-red vortex. Then, like a drop of ink falling into clear water, it began to spread outwards at an astonishing speed. In a breath of time, the darkness occupied the core region of the blood-red vortex. But after it passed this boundary, the speed at which it spread slowed down, as if it was being suppressed by a powerful strength. True Saint Baiyu, who had escaped from the battlefield, relaxed as he saw this. What he was most worried about was that Qin Yu would be directly killed. If this really happened, then regardless of what problems Blood Flag would encounter afterwards, he himself would be in deep trouble. Without any hesitation, True Saint Baiyu turned and left, rushing back to the imperial capital at an astonishing speed. Intercepting someone in the capital region was already a great taboo. If it was anyone else today, they wouldn't necessarily dare to stop a border army team. Only a madman like Blood Flag would dare to ignore this. And once they entered the imperial capital, even Blood Flag wouldn't dare to casually attack them. This was because even a madman didn't want to die. And within the imperial capital, recklessly sending out experts to intercept someone would provoke the sensitive nerves of the imperial palace. Whether it was to protect the dignity of the imperial palace or to make an example of someone to warn the future generations, they would never tolerate this. This point had already been amply proven in the past. Thus, true Saint Bayou was very clear that the assassination in the capital region was the bottom line. As long as he could return to the imperial capital, no one would dare to attack him again. Suddenly, true Saint Bayou's expression changed drastically. He maintained his high-speed escape mode and didn't try to dodge. That was because he knew that his aura had been completely locked on, and there was no way for him to escape. With a low roar, a jade ornament that true Saint Bayou was wearing shattered with a paw. Boundless power rose up and gathered behind him, forming a powerful defense. In the next instant, a blood-colored palm suddenly appeared, and without any hesitation, it slammed heavily towards true Saint Bayou. With a loud sound, his entire body was blasted down and smashed heavily onto the ground. Mud and stones flew everywhere, forming a terrifying trench in the ground. However, in the next instant, there was a whistling sound as true Saint Bayou, who was vomiting mouthfuls of blood, flew out again and continued to rush towards the imperial capital. His eyes were filled with shock, anger, and fear. His respect for Blood Flag instantly increased by a few levels. Just a casual slap from the Blood Flag had such power. If he hadn't sensed that the situation was bad and used his life-saving treasure, he would have already been turned into a pile of broken bones. Blood Flag's strength was even greater than the rumor said. Darkness Ruler, this is all I can do for you. Whether or not you can survive will depend on yourself. Boom! A blue gust of wind suddenly appeared, directly wrapping around true Saint Bayou. His speed suddenly rose, and he disappeared from sight. Blood Flag glanced at the black vortex that was spreading outwards. He frowned and suppressed the killing intent in his heart. Although the fact that a prey had escaped, and it was an imperial bloodline that he was very interested in, as long as he killed the Darkness Ruler, he would be satisfied today. Killing people in the capital region had always been a great taboo, so Blood Flag was well aware of this. If there were no accidents, someone would soon arrive, so he didn't have much time left. Unfortunately, if this were a different situation, he would have been able to play around with this Darkness Ruler. The Darkness Ruler controlled was quite extraordinary. Blood Flag's lips curved in a smile. With a thought, he released his suppression. The darkness in the depths of the blood-colored vortex spread out like a prisoner that had been freed, instantly turning it pitch black. Chapter 1477. The blood-red vortex formed a space of its own. Within it was a blood sea that recklessly tumbled about. Qin Yu was currently in this blood sea. The moment he entered, he knew that it would be difficult to break through it with his own strength. Since he couldn't break it, his only choice was to fuse with it, corrode it with the power of darkness, and finally seize control of this blood sea. This certainly wasn't an easy matter. Otherwise, if the blood sea could be casually taken away by others, how could the Blood Flag dare to use it as a trap to hunt down prey? On the surface, it seemed that Qin Yu had fallen into a disadvantage after being swallowed into the blood sea. But from another perspective, this was also where his advantage lay. It was because he was in the blood sea that he was able to release the power of darkness and instantly pollute the surrounding sea. When it turned black, it also fell into Qin Yu's grasp. But soon, the Blood Flag displayed its tyrannical cultivation and control. After the power of darkness polluted the sea, it suffered a formidable suppression. The entire blood sea roared. Billowing waves rose up, carrying with them a world-destroying momentum that swept out from all directions. They were like angry fists that wanted to shatter the darkness in the sea region. Qin Yu did his best to resist them, and only then was he able to barely resist them. But He knew that this wasn't the blood flag's full strength. So, Qinyu was waiting for it to erupt with its true strength. When one was at a disadvantage, revealing one's cards first was an extremely stupid choice. Only by keeping it in hand and waiting for the right moment could it display its greatest effect. Suddenly, the blood sea suppression on the power of darkness loosened a little. A hole appeared in the solid blockade. A sharp light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. He didn't know what was happening, but the opportunity was fleeting in front of him. Although there were some strange things, he couldn't care too much about it right now. With a loud shout, the dark emperor crown appeared on his head. The eye of eternal night embedded in the center began to emit a dim light. The power of darkness erupted like a volcano, brazenly colliding with the blood sea suppression and forcefully breaking through it. This caused the range of pollution to expand, allowing it to gain more control over the blood sea. Qin Yu took a deep breath. The dark emperor crown trembled with it, and the power of darkness surged out to deal with the counterattack that was about to erupt from the blood sea. But the reality was that the suppressive suppression of the blood sea didn't arrive. Instead, it instantly gave up all resistance and allowed the power of darkness to recklessly rush out in all directions like a wild horse. Everything he passed by was pitch black, and the entire blood sea turned into the color of night in a short period of time. Qin Yu's complexion changed, and a gloomy look appeared in his eyes. He certainly didn't believe that he could defeat the blood flag because of a single mistake. He did not understand this person, but true Saint Bai Yu's reaction and what he sensed showed how terrifying the blood flag was. Then there was only one explanation: a trap. This sea of blood was there to hunt him down. But if things didn't go well, it could also turn into a tomb to bury him. The blood flag gave up control of the blood sea on its own initiative and allowed the strength of darkness to contaminate it. This was to completely bind Qin Yu to the blood sea. If their positions were swapped, what would blood flag do? Qin Yu's eyebrows jumped up. His heart violently shrank as a great restlessness rose in him. In the next moment, the sea of blood that had been contaminated by the dark power suddenly began to shatter and split apart in rumbling noises. The blood flag's complexion was pale, his eyebrows furrowed together, as if he were enduring pain. But the corners of his lips curled up in a cruel and callous smile. My blood, see, isn't that easy to control. If you swallow it into your stomach and it explodes with a bang, how are you going to survive then? The strength of darkness contaminating the blood sea was, strictly speaking, an application of the strength of the great Tao. Thus, in the eyes of the blood flag, Qin Yu was forcefully fusing his own great Tao into the blood sea and seizing control over it. As a powerhouse that had walked out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood, he had fought countless battles in his life and had escaped death countless times. Thus, the blood flag had a rich combat experience. Many years ago, he discovered that there was a great flaw in his blood sea. Once he swallowed a true saint-level powerhouse, it was likely he would be corroded by their great Tao and lose control. If it were any other cultivator, the first thing they would think of after realizing this would be to abandon the flawed blood sea. After all, as an extreme true saint who also had formidable trump cards, the blood flag grasped many different killing methods. Abandoning one of them wouldn't have any effect on his strength. But the blood sea wasn't an ordinary person. The blood flag had spent a great deal of time and energy to forcefully upgrade the blood sea. The upgraded blood sea still had its initial flaw, but it had transformed into the one in his hands. But now it had transformed into a great killing tool in his hands. Once an enemy was swallowed by the blood sea and used their own great Tao to seize the blood sea, they would have already stepped into the gates of hell. The great Tao collapsed and the Saint Tao perished. This was an irreversible rule in the desolate region. Besides some extremely rare and special bloodlines or heaven-defying divine artifacts, no one could withstand the fate of their great Tao collapsing. Thus, all the blood flag needed to do was turn a thought and push the stolen blood sea into the abyss of destruction. The blood flag had done similar things many times before. The reason it hadn't revealed the secret of the Blood Sea was because of all the cultivators that had been swallowed by the Blood Sea, not a single one had managed to survive. And today, the blood flag didn't think there would be an exception. The Blood Sea had already begun to collapse. The Darkness Chief's great Tao would inevitably shatter along with it. Unless he was at the ruler realm, it would be difficult for him to escape death. As for the Darkness Chief, he naturally wasn't at the ruler realm. This was something that the blood flag had already confirmed. The crazily spinning blood-red vortex suddenly froze. Tiny black cracks began to appear within the blood-red vortex. They were dense and numerous, like a spider web weaving together. They covered every corner of the vortex, splitting it into countless fragments of varying sizes. The next moment, accompanied by a soft paw sound, the whirlpool shattered into pieces, like a mirror that had fallen to the ground. The blood flag's smile widened. He took a deep breath, preparing to enjoy the harvest he should have obtained after killing his prey. But nothing appeared at all. The smile on his face froze, and he frowned. His eyes were cold and gloomy, and there was a faint puzzlement in them. He clearly couldn't understand why the Darkness Chief, who should have died, was still alive and well. The great Tao fused with the Blood Sea. If the Blood Sea shattered, the great Tao would collapse, but this wasn't important. What was important was that the Darkness Chief was still alive. This meant that the blood flag's attempt to kill him had ended in failure. This was because the imperial capital had finally responded. Whoosh, whoosh. With the sound of breaking air, two figures howled over. Although they were still far away, the terrifying pressure they emitted was like a monstrous tsunami that seemed to block out the sun. Rulers. And there were two of them. The two commanders of the imperial capital's guard division were both here today. What a coincidence. But in this world, there weren't too many natural coincidences. Thus, in the end, there were still people who chose the other path. Of course, they were also watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, Qinyu, who had resisted the Blood Sea's hidden killing methods, had finally found a chance to continue living. Blood Flag furrowed his eyebrows and then quietly relaxed. He let out a light breath and restrained his aura, a helpless look on his face. Blood Flag, immediately surrender and follow us back to the guard division to be interrogated. A deep shout came from afar. Within the anger, there was also a bit of irrepressible annoyance. Shwa, Shwa, the two commanders of the Imperial Guard Division landed at the same time. The one on the left was surnamed Yi, and the one on the right was also surnamed Yi. This wasn't some nonsense, but an important fact. In the Western Wasteland Army, the two giant trees with the surname Yi were not actually from the same family. To be more precise, the two sides were sworn enemies who supervised and kept each other in check. For countless years, as the two great Yi families that controlled more than 70% of the empire's military strength, the stories of their open and secret struggles were enough to be written for hundreds of years. Both sides had suffered casualties. Although there had never been any open conflict, even a 3-year-old child in the imperial capital knew that the two Yi families were as incompatible as fire and water. That was why the Imperial Guard Division had two commanders. That was why they both had the surname Yi. Because they had officially entered the Empire stage at different times, the people of the Western Wasteland were used to calling them the Old Yi family and the later Yi family. The one who spoke was an important figure of the Old Yi family. He had a ruler realm cultivation and would be a commander in the army. His words naturally carried a lot of weight. Even the crazy Blood Flag didn't dare to ignore it. Yes, Blood Flag bowed and accepted the order. His expression was calm. He didn't resist, but he didn't show any fear either. The big shot of the later Yi family frowned. When his eyes landed on Blood Flag, a cold look of disgust appeared on his face. The sounds of battle in the distance disappeared. Blood Flag, who was fighting with Jiang Qingzi, disappeared like a shadow. Blood Flag, who was calmly waiting to be dealt with, didn't show any change in his aura. Such a method made the eyes of the three generals present reveal a trace of fear. One had to know that sometimes being able to completely conceal one's aura was truly terrifying. Millimeter without a doubt, Blood Flag had achieved this. Jiang Qingzi's breathing was slightly hurried. His white hair was slightly damp. He landed on the ground and cupped his hands in greeting. West Border Army Jiang Qingzi greets the two commanders. In terms of scale, the Imperial Guard Division couldn't be compared to the West Border Army. However, it was located at the heart of the Western Wasteland. It was the Imperial Capital Army that directly protected the safety of the Imperial capital. Their status was extremely high in the army, and their commander's position was comparable to the commander of the Border Army. Of course, the strength of the ruler realm was enough for the two commanders to be on equal footing with the commander of the Border Army. Jiang Qingzi, we haven't seen each other for a long time. It's not easy to wait for you to return to the capital. Let's find a chance to have a few drinks. General Yi of the old Yi family said with a smile. His broad face made people feel close to him. He didn't look like a general in charge of the Imperial Capital Army, but more like a close friend of the same generation. Jiang Qingzi bowed respectfully. He didn't slack off because of his good intentions. Thank you for your invitation, General Yi Qin, but the schedule is tight and the situation in the West Border is not stable. I will return immediately after the report. I'm afraid I won't have time to attend the banquet. The head of the later Yi family frowned. He didn't smile. His face looked like it was carved from stone. Now, just a slight frown gave people a strong sense of oppression. The Western barbarians are causing trouble again. Jiang Qingzi nodded solemnly. In the past 6 months, dozens of conflicts have broken out. Although we have suffered a lot, the Western barbarians have not retreated. The commander is worried that after hundreds of years of recuperation, the Western barbarians have recovered some of their strength. So, they are ready to move again. The head of the later Yi family was Yi Xiling. He said, military affairs are the first priority. Since the Western barbarians have bad intentions, you should return to the West Border as soon as possible and assist the commander in suppressing them. Jiang Qingzi cupped his hands and accepted the order. General Yi Qin revealed a helpless expression. How could the imperial capital not know the situation in the border? You and I are both counselors of the military council. We have discussed this many times. Why do you have to put on a show in front of me? Looking at Jiang Qingzi's white hair poking out from under his helmet, General Yi Qin sighed inwardly. The task of infiltrating the West Border Army was indeed a long way off. Of course, his thoughts were not fake, but his expression didn't reveal the slightest bit of it. He solemnly nodded, showing an expression of agreement. Since there is no chance this time, then next time. I can afford to wait. This was a pun. Although it didn't have any practical meaning, it was enough to bury a grain of sand in the hearts of the two. Once or twice wasn't much, but if it piled up, who knew what would happen in the future? What's more, these were Yi Qin's sincere words. The West Border Army was extremely important. It occupied nearly 20% of the Imperial Army's military strength, but it was so tightly managed that not even a drop of water could enter. For many years, the old Yi family had made countless attempts, but all of them had ended in failure. Of course, this was something that could not be tolerated, and Jiang Qingzi was an extremely important chess piece in the eyes of the old Yi family. Although he wasn't the commander of the West Border Army and was only ranked 4th, this old general had taken root in the West Border Army ever since he joined the army. Step by step, he had become the 4th general of today from a small soldier. It could be said that his trusted friends and old friends were all over the West Border Army, and he had extremely high prestige and rallying power. If they could establish a good relationship with him, then the old Yi family's involvement in the West Border Army would be half a success. This involved nearly 20% of the Empire's military strength. Of course, This wasn't something that could be easily resolved. Thus, the old Yi family had long since made ample preparations to run into a wall in front of Jiang Qingzi. Jiang Qingzi revealed a helpless expression. A bitter smile appeared on his lips as he cupped his hands together in response. Yi Ziling's face was expressionless. His face was as cold as stone, completely concealing the emotions in his heart. But thinking about it, he must be gnashing his teeth in hatred towards Yi Qin for trying to poach him. Roping in, evading, watching from the sidelines, things had come to an end for the time being. The three generals of the army didn't lose their composure too much. Yi Qin said in a deep voice, "Blood Flag, come with us." Blood Flag, who had his head bowed in silence, raised his head when he heard this. His lips curved into a smile. "I rarely fail, but I didn't gain anything today. I have to take a good look at this unexpected ruler of darkness before I can leave with you too. Blood Flag, don't cause any more trouble. There is a limit to the military's tolerance towards you," Yi Ziling coldly said. But his eyes were even colder, revealing an undisguised callousness. Blood Flag's smile deepened. He licked the corner of his lips, his scarlet tongue extremely demonic. "Are you threatening me?" The air suddenly fell silent. Yi Ziling frowned. He stepped forward and raised a hand. "As the commander of the Imperial Guard Division, I warn you one last time. Give up resistance and leave immediately. Otherwise, you will be treated as a traitor." Chapter 1478. Qin Yu sighed inwardly. He knew that he couldn't continue to hide. Otherwise, regardless of what punishment Blood Flag would receive, he would have many more enemies. In the end, this tense situation was all because of him. Everyone was well aware that Qin Yu was still alive and well. He wanted to stay out of this and watch from the sidelines, waiting for the Blood Flag to suffer a calamity after the lively show? Haha! Things weren't that simple. You clearly could have come out and prevented things from worsening further, but you chose not to. This was a sin. Although it was a bit of a tongue twister, it wasn't hard to understand the meaning behind it. This wasn't the result Qin you wanted to see. No matter what background or origin Yi Qin and Yi Ziling had, their appearance here today represented a certain degree of goodwill. In the imperial capital that was already surrounded by enemies, if he pushed down those who showed goodwill, he would only be surrounded by enemies. If he was strong enough, he wouldn't need to worry too much. After all, in this world, strength was always number one. But in front of him was the Western Wasteland's imperial capital. Even a ruler could only be reduced to a chess piece, so what could Qin Yu do? He could only be careful at all times and avoid risks as much as possible. Shua! Space twisted and Qin Yu stepped out from his black robes. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Greetings, generals. Thank you for helping me today." Yi Ziling angrily snorted. He slowly took a step back. Although his expression was cold and gloomy, he actually relaxed inwardly. Although he had already prepared himself to attack, the series of consequences and unknown risks were hard for him to bear. His eyes swept over Qin Yu. Something flashed deep in his eyes before he immediately composed himself. Yi Qin secretly sighed in pity. He actually wanted to see a lively scene and see the Yi family collide with the complicated background behind Blood Flag. As his eyes fell on the Dark Ruler, there wasn't much coldness in them. Rather, there was a bit of appreciation. This was a smart person. As for smart people, most of them could live longer in this world, which made them more valuable as an investment. From this point of view, his appearance here and the attitude he had displayed was an extremely worthwhile thing to do. Cough! Blood Flag, you've already seen the person, so there's no need to complicate matters any further. Come with us. Jiang Qingzi was expressionless and didn't express his opinion on this matter. He glanced at Qin Yu from the corner of his eyes and thought that Bai Zu's judgment of people was indeed quite good. Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu frowned. He looked up and stared at the Blood Flag. "You're not bad. Thank you for your praise, Your Excellency. Although you appear to be very calm and your tone does not reveal the slightest bit of emotion, I have killed countless people in my life, and killing is always risky. I have experienced many twists and turns, so my senses are quite sharp. So, you really want to kill me?" It wasn't an inquiry, nor was it an interrogation. Instead, it was a plain and straightforward statement that brought the matter to light. Qin Yu arched an eyebrow, not responding. And sometimes silence itself was the best answer. That's right, he wanted to kill. Ever since he came into contact with the Peach Blossom Garden and met Peach Girl, his cultivation had entered the fast lane. After several lucky chances, he had leapt up like the sun in the sky and obtained his current strength. In the vast Yang world, he couldn't say that he was completely fearless, but at the very least, in a situation where the sovereign didn't publicly appear, he truly had nothing to fear. After that, he killed the Darkness Chief Sovereign and obtained the Darkness Thearchus crown. Then he obtained the Eye of Darkness and the Divine Kingdom. All of this unknowingly piled on top of Qin Yu's own confidence and pride. However, after he entered the Western Wilderness, he had clearly done nothing. Yet he had fallen into a dangerous whirlpool, and many terrifying enemies had appeared in the dark. All of them wanted him to die. If this really was a life or death enmity, then Qin Yu could accept it. But the key problem was that he still didn't know who it was that wanted to kill him. Although he appeared calm on the surface, Qin Yu was actually incomparably angry in his heart. It was just that the current situation didn't allow him to recklessly vent his anger, so he could only suppress it all in his heart. Today, facing the Blood Flag's ambush in the capital region, Qin Yu was still patiently enduring it, but the raging killing intent in his heart was becoming increasingly strong. He needed an outlet to vent it, and the Blood Flag was the first person to jump out on their own initiative, completely exposing themselves to Qin Yu. That's right, in Qin Yu's opinion, any action that tried to kill him was unforgivable. Once the grudge between them was formed, it could not be resolved. In the end, life and death would be decided. Killing the Blood Flag was undoubtedly risky, but if there was a chance to do so, Qin Yu wouldn't hesitate. At the very least, he wanted to let those high and mighty figures in the imperial capital know that he wasn't a chess piece that could be casually manipulated. As for what consequences this would bring, could it be that if Qin Yu pretended that today's ambush hadn't happened, Blood Flag would be able to bury the hatchet with him? Ha! From the look in his eyes, Qin Yu knew that the Blood Flag was indeed a madman. Today's failed ambush was only the beginning. He really did regard Qin Yu as prey that had to be killed. The Blood Flag wanted to kill Qin Yu, and Qin Yu wanted to kill him. As for the consequences, that could wait until after he was killed. Since Li Yizhou was able to forcefully drag him into the Western Wilderness, then he wouldn't be without strength. At the very least, he had a powerful supporter behind him. The stronger Qin Yu appeared, the more important he would be, and the more important he would be. Qin Yu didn't believe that they would just stare blankly on as Li Yizhou was beaten into the dust and do nothing. Today's silence didn't mean that they would remain silent in the future. The Blood Flag smiled, an incomparably brilliant and joyous expression, as if he had seen something wonderful. The Dark Ruler in front of him actually wanted to kill him, and he even dared to kill him. In his life, there had been countless people that wanted to kill him, but to dare to kill him today was the first. Such an interesting person definitely had to be killed as soon as possible. The reason was, as he said before, a madman didn't want to die. Since he sensed that Qin Yu wanted to kill him, dared to kill him, and was also a bit threatening, then taking the initiative to kill him was the best choice. Thus, in the next moment, a crimson light appeared in the depths of Blood Flag's eyes. It was extremely faint and dim. Even if it was standing in front of him, it would be hard to detect. And most importantly, Blood Flag's own aura didn't change at all during this process. But Qin Yu could sense a dangerous aura. Since he was certain that Blood Flag hadn't given up on killing him, Qin Yu naturally dreaded this powerful madman. So, the moment that crimson light appeared in the depths of Blood Flag's eyes, Qin Yu had already locked onto it. All of the hairs on his back stood up. He didn't know what methods his opponent was using, but his instincts told him that he had fallen into great danger. Avoid! This was Qin Yu's first thought. But in the next moment, the world in front of him was completely covered in blood red. In Qin Yu's world, the crimson light in the depths of Blood Flag's eyes instantly expanded countless times over, swallowing him whole. Wrapped in this crimson light, an endless chill erupted from deep within his body, sweeping out to fill every inch of his flesh and blood. It forcefully deprived Qin Yu of control over his body. This deprivation targeted not only his mortal body, but even his soul. At this time, the only thing Qin Yu could control was his own thoughts. And that was it. Thus, he could only watch from the sidelines as he slowly lifted his hand and slapped it between his eyebrows. Although the speed wasn't fast, the strength contained within this palm was enough to instantly blow apart his head. At this moment, Qin Yu suddenly recalled true Saint Bayu's warning. The most powerful method of Blood Flag was that it could control a person's mind. So that was how it was. It was truly fierce. The chicken overlord stood on Qin Yu's shoulder. After its body shrank, its feathers became even more dazzling. One could tell at a glance that it wasn't ordinary. In fact, her slightly plump body also shrunk along with her body, giving off a soft and cute feeling. But at this time, at some unknown time, its eyes had quietly turned crimson, as if they had been soaked in blood for a long time. It turned its head, stiff and stiff, its blood-red eyes stubbornly locked onto Qin Yu's neck, where blood vessels had popped up due to the tension in its body. Suddenly, the chicken overlord stretched out its head and bit down. Its speed was astonishing, so fast that it pierced through the air, emitting an ear-piercing whistling sound. Pa! Its sharp beak, sharp enough to break through stone, was grabbed by a hand. No matter how much it struggled, it couldn't break free. Qin Yu slowly exerted strength. No matter how the chicken overlord struggled, he grabbed it from his shoulder and lifted it up. He shook his head and sighed, "How shameful. My own pet was actually controlled by someone else, and I nearly suffered a backlash." As his words fell, two beams of light shot out from his black robes, staring at Blood Flag. "The only consolation is that you didn't come without a price." With a stuffy cough, blood gushed out from Blood Flag's nose, and his face instantly paled. Shock and anger gushed out from his chest. He shouted out loud, "Impossible!" He found it hard to believe that his true killing move had been directly broken, and even caused him to suffer a backlash. This was the first time such a situation had occurred since he had completed his cultivation, and his opponent was a mere ruler of darkness who hadn't even reached the ruler realm. Enough! Yi Xiling lifted a hand and pressed down. With a loud bang, Blood Flag was pushed down and the ground cracked apart. Yi Qin's complexion was ugly. He said, "Blood Flag, don't go too far. Today ends here. Otherwise, I won't give you any face." In a situation where two of the capital's guard officers were present, Blood Flag had still attacked. Although he hadn't succeeded in the end and had even suffered a backlash, to Yi Qin and Yi Xiling, this was a great humiliation and disregard. Thus, Yi Xiling had brazenly suppressed him, and Yi Qin had also expressed his attitude. This was something they had to do. Otherwise, their prestige would be greatly damaged. How would they be able to command their subordinates in the future? Their status in the eyes of the great figures of the capital would also be shaken. If they couldn't handle such a small matter, how would they be able to shoulder great responsibilities in the future? Blood Flag lay on the ground, staring straight at Qin Yu. He closed his eyes and then opened them again. "Very good. I admit defeat today, but I will remember you." Chapter 1479. Pa! Qin Yu suddenly stepped forwards, a cold light flowing beneath his black robes. As his eyes fell on the Blood Flag, there was only a bone-chilling coldness in them. "Since your Excellency Blood Flag is prepared to completely remember me, then you might as well remember me more clearly, lest you forget me in the future." The air suddenly turned silent. All eyes gathered on him, including the suppressed blood flag. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up, revealing a trace of mockery. The meaning was very clear. Do you dare to kill me? Qin Yu walked to Blood Flag's side and paused for a moment. Then he lifted a foot and stepped on Blood Flag's head. You! Xueqi roared. He only had time to utter one word before his entire head was forcefully pressed into the soil. The gazes that fell on Qin Yu all froze at this moment, including Yi Qin and Yi Xiling, the two generals. They did not expect that Qin Yu would dare to do such a thing in public. Qin Yu could feel the shock in these people's eyes. He couldn't help but feel a bit restless in his heart. But there was even more joy. What he was going to do now was what he had said before he arrived. Qin Yu had an incomparably deep anger in his heart, and he had to vent some of it. Secondly, the blood flag was already determined to kill him. So what if the enmity between them deepened? Trample on him, so be it. You're going to kill me, yet you're not going to let me vent my anger? At this time, Qin Yu stepped atop the blood flag. Beneath his black robes, killing intent swirled deep in his eyes. But he didn't attack because his intuition told him that the blood flag wouldn't be easy to kill. It was even possible that the sight of blood flag being stepped on and unable to resist was only a bait. Blood flag was waiting for Qin Yu to kill him. At this time, countless thoughts raced through his mind. Qin Yu let out a deep breath and drew back. He cupped his hands together and said, I was too excited for a moment and handled things improperly. I ask that you two commanders not blame me. Yi Qin shook his head and didn't say anything. Yi Xiling grabbed the blood flag. After glancing at Qin Yu, she turned and soared into the sky, vanishing in the direction of the imperial capital. Blood flag has a powerful background. Since you don't dare to kill him today, you shouldn't provoke him anymore. The imperial capital is right in front of you. The matter of Bai Su helping you has come to an end. I hope that you will draw a clear line between you and him in the future. After Jiang Qingzi finished speaking, he cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Qin. Then he turned around and walked towards the border army. By speaking up in front of this person, they were making it clear that their faction would no longer interfere in anything that happened next. Therefore, no matter what happened in the future, it had nothing to do with them. Chief Sovereign of Darkness, follow me into the imperial capital. Yi Qin said with a smile, but his tone revealed alienation and indifference. Stomping Xueqi's head into the ground was indeed very satisfying, but apart from venting his anger, what was the use of it? Previously, Zhang Xian had thought that the God of Darkness was a smart person. However, it seemed that he had misjudged him. At most, he was just a brute with a bit of smarts. Before this, there might have been some room for reconciliation, but after this matter, any faction that tried to accept him would become the blood flag's mortal enemy. There was no need to say what choice he should make. He was doomed, since the chief sovereign of darkness didn't dare to kill Blood Flag. Then in the future, he would definitely die at Blood Flag's hands. And with Blood Flag's temperament, this day would definitely not be far off. Yi Qin naturally lacked interest in a person who was about to die soon. Qin Yu cupped his hands together and calmly said, I'll have to trouble you. This was the first time he stepped into the western wasteland imperial capital. This was the peak and most bustling city of the wasteland region, and the situation he faced could be described as bleak and miserable. True Saint Baitu's whereabouts were unknown. He must have been taken away by Jiang Qingzi and was not allowed to have too much contact with him. After Yi Qin spoke a few words, he turned and left, not paying any more attention to Qin Yu. An imperial capital guard coldly brought Qin Yu into a stone room. Wait here. Before someone comes to pick you up, you are not allowed to casually walk around. Bang! The door closed and the surroundings fell silent. Qin Yu swept his eyes around the stone room, his eyes flashing beneath his black robes. It was clear that this small and extremely simple stone room wasn't as ordinary as it seemed on the surface. Was he under house arrest in disguise? Because of the blood flag? No, that shouldn't be the case. If the blood flag really had such great influence, there was no need for him to personally kill them. There was a high chance that the problem lay with Li Ijo. It seemed that this Sixth Highness of the Western Wasteland wasn't having a good time right now. Strictly speaking, the reason Li Ijo had fallen to his current state was all thanks to Qin Yu. To be able to use his status as a broken world cultivator to strike down a highness of the Western Wasteland was something to be proud of. But now, all of this had indirectly affected Qin Yu. Could this be considered being caught in a cocoon of one's own making? If he knew this would happen, he would have gone easy on Li Ijo and left some face for better or worse. Qin Yu bitterly smiled and shook his head, suppressing these thoughts. There was no meaning in thinking about these things now. From the information he obtained, he was Li Ijo's last hope. In other words, as long as there was even the slightest possibility, Li Ijo wouldn't give up on him. Since he had already entered the imperial capital, even if there were some difficulties, Qin Yu believed that Li Ijo would soon appear in front of him. This was especially true after Qin Yu had revealed a sufficiently formidable strength. The development of events indicated that Li Ijo's current situation was far worse than he had imagined. This was because for the next 3 days, Qin Yu seemed to have been forgotten by everyone. He was placed under house arrest in this small stone room, with no one paying any attention to him. Beneath his black robes, his eyebrows furrowed tighter and tighter. As he prepared himself for the worst possible outcome, the tightly shut stone door finally opened on the 4th day. Qin Yu was quietly picked up. He boarded a carriage and drove down the long streets of the imperial capital. Your Highness is in a difficult situation, and many people are kicking you while you're down. But this is enough to show just how strong your Highness is. They are all afraid. They are worried that after your Highness makes a comeback, you will no longer be someone they can contend with. Within the carriage, Saint Zhou Yin slowly spoke. His voice was calm and relaxed, and there was a natural and convincing aura to it. Fortunately, he was covered by his black robes, so it didn't reveal the strange expression on Qin Yu's face. It had to be known that back in the world Zeroth, he had worn the identity of Saint Zhou Yin for a long time. After Li Ijo returned to the Western Wasteland, he actually did not tear apart the real Saint Zhou Yin. This was something he could not understand. Was the Sixth Highness of the Western Wasteland too stupid, or was the real Saint Zhou Yin too shrewd? Looking at the Saint Zhou Yin who could explain Li Ijo's predicament in such a refreshing and refined manner, Qin Yu guessed that it was both. After all, facing Li Ijo who had been played around by him, it was hard for Qin Yu to admit that this Sixth Highness was a smart person. Suppressing all these random thoughts, Qin Yu slowly asked, "Where are we going?" Saint Zhou Yin said, "Your Highness's temporary imperial residence." This answer further confirmed Qin Yu's conjecture. Li Ijo's current life was indeed extremely difficult. In the current imperial capital, the only thing he could still control was his own temporary imperial residence. The dignified prince of the Western Desolation, with such a noble and illustrious status, had actually fallen to such a state. In the imperial capital, there were really many people who wanted to consign him to eternal damnation. But there was one point that Qin Yu really couldn't understand. Even if he used his knees to think, he would know that to be able to sit firmly on the throne of the Western Desolation, his cultivation must be extremely high. Half-Emperor was just the starting point, and one had to be a realm higher to qualify for such an existence. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was omnipotent, and his lifespan was limitless. Was the fight for the throne so intense now? Was there a need for this? The princes and princesses of the Western Desolation had caused such a huge commotion about the fight for the throne. Were they not afraid of angering the Desolation Emperor? A bunch of bastards, are they hoping for me to die? If he couldn't understand something, he would temporarily put it aside. He believed that after meeting Li Ijo, he would be able to get some answers. The key was that the more difficult the situation Li Ijo faced, the more importance he would place on Qinyu. The imperial capital was very big, and after the restricted teleportation formation was set up, the journey became especially long. Fortunately, Sage Zhou Yan was good at talking, and with Qin Yu's intention to find out more information, with a tacit communication between the two, it wasn't difficult to pass the time. After a long time, the carriage finally stopped. Sage Zhou Yan lifted the curtains to take a look, and with a smile, he stood up and went out first. Ruler of Darkness, please. The prince's temporary imperial residence was majestic, spanning several long streets and occupying an unknown amount of land, showing the majesty and nobility of the royal family. But now, it gave off a feeling of decadence and sadness. Even the neatly arranged trees outside the temporary imperial residence seemed a little weak between the branches. What was especially strange was that the guards outside the temporary imperial residence were actually soldiers of the imperial capital. Sensing the surprise in Qin Yu's eyes, Sage Zhou Yan coughed lightly and said, "Now that the imperial capital is not peaceful, His Majesty has ordered the guards to temporarily take over the defense of the temporary imperial residence, which shows how much importance he places on the Sixth Highness." The corner of Qin Yu's mouth twitched. He thought to himself that his ability to bullshit was really top-notch. Most importantly, his face wasn't red and he wasn't panting. Perhaps because he felt that his attitude was a little overboard, Sage Zhou Yan coughed lightly and led Qin Yu into the temporary imperial residence under the cold gaze of the soldiers of the imperial capital. In contrast to the tight security of the outside world, there were very few people in the temporary imperial residence. Along the way, they only met about 10 servant girls who were walking hurriedly. In the huge prince's temporary imperial residence, it added to the desolate and miserable atmosphere. Due to the influence of the outside world, Sage Zhou Yan, who was very good at talking, also fell into a state of silence. His eyes revealed a hint of worry. His gaze subconsciously swept across Qin Yu, who was quietly following behind him. Sage Zhou Yan secretly complained, thinking that His Highness's luck was really terrible. Originally, he thought that he had found a chance of survival in a desperate situation, but who would have thought that those people would actually invite Blood Flag to take action? Now, as 3 days passed, the assassination incident in the capital region had already spread like wildfire. Everyone knew that Qin Yu had stepped on Blood Flag's head and pressed it into the ground. Who was Blood Flag? How could he let the matter rest after suffering such a great humiliation? Sure enough, news soon spread that he would also be participating in the upcoming major event. With Blood Flag, would Qin Yu still be able to survive? This was a question that could be answered even with one's knee. If he died, then so be it. Sage Zhou Yan did not care at all. However, His Highness's last hope would be destroyed, and he, the trusted aide of His Highness, who was known by everyone in the western wilderness, could only follow him into eternal ruin. Walking in the desolate prince's temporary imperial residence, Sage Zhou Yan finally could not maintain his calm on the surface, as his heart was filled with fear and unease. But the problem was, who could explain why Zhou Yan, suddenly became His Highness' trusted aide? What exactly happened during that period of time? Sage Zhou Yan wanted to confess to His Highness that he did not know anything. When His Highness hurriedly came to find him, he played a joke on him in a moment of panic. But he knew that Li Yizhou was in his most distressed and dangerous state. If he dared to say such a thing, he would definitely be torn to pieces by Li Yizhou's anger. In the end, the prince was still the prince. Even if he was thrown into the abyss, he still had 100 ways to drag him and all his relatives into eternal damnation. Pah! His footsteps came to a halt. Sage Zhou Yan took a deep breath and squeezed out a smile. Dark Ruler, His Highness is in the main hall. You can go in. Just as he finished speaking, the doors opened on their own. Li Yizhou's calm voice sounded out. There is no need. Sage Zhou Yan is the person I trust the most. There is no need to keep anything a secret from you. Come in together. Zhou Yan, I want to cry. Your Highness, please forgive me. Can you not trust me so much? This subordinate really cannot bear it. His heart was wailing in pain. But on the surface, he had to shed tears of gratitude. This was truly a test of his acting skills. Qin Yu sighed in amazement. He thought that there really was a mountain higher than the last. Indeed, there was always someone to learn from. In terms of cultivation and strength, someone like Sage Zhou Yan could fight a group of people. But in terms of acting skills, Qin Yu was far inferior. The interior of the main hall was empty. The candlesticks that were embedded into the walls were mostly extinguished. In addition, the curtains of the doors and windows were pulled open, causing the interior to be dark and depressing. Li Yizhou was sitting on a chair in the main hall. In front of him was a cup of tea that had already gone cold. As he heard the sound of footsteps, he slowly looked up. His eyes that were filled with fatigue and pain suddenly exploded with a sharp light. "Greetings, Your Highness." Humorous, Zhou bowed to the ground. Beneath his black robes, Qin Yu bowed. "Greetings, Your Highness." Li Yizhou waved his hand. "Rise." He leaned back in his chair. His eyes drooped, concealing the fluctuations within them. "Dark Ruler, you have already been in the desolate region for several days. Do you understand what will happen next?" Qin Yu said, "I know a bit." "Very good. Then I'll save myself the trouble of explaining." Li Yizhou rapped the back of his chair, a cold sneer on his face. "Right now, in the imperial capital, everyone is waiting for me to fall so that they can tear apart my bones and eat my flesh. But I will not allow them to do as they wish. The ambush in the capital region was my mishandling of the situation. From now on, there will absolutely be no similar incidents. That is my guarantee. But remember, this is my final chance. Either I rise up or I fall into depravity. If I can rise up, then all my future glory and honor will be shared with you. Otherwise, I ask that Dark Ruler follow me into a prison that will never see the light of day again." This was a naked threat, but it was also the most effective method to deal with the current situation. Li Yizhou was still Li Yizhou, but compared to when he was in World Zero, he had changed far too much. The hardness, callousness, and wisdom of the Emperor bloodline had awakened within him. But what a pity, in the end, your father is still your father. I'm standing in front of you. So how much do I look like before? Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Your Highness, rest assured that I will do my best to help you escape your predicament and rise up once more." When he made his statement, he was wondering why that woman hadn't contacted him yet. She had already come to the desolate region. So why couldn't she explain things clearly? Just what was she waiting for? Chapter 1480. Qin Yu didn't wait for an explanation. Instead, he received a decree from the imperial palace, ordering him to enter the palace immediately without delay. Li Yizhou personally came to see him off. He said in a low voice, "There is no need to panic. The reason we are entering the palace today is because of the importance of the matter. There is no room for mistakes. We need to confirm it one last time." "I see." Qin Yu's voice was calm. Under his black robe, white sweat appeared on his forehead. He suddenly realized why that woman hadn't contacted him yet. It seemed that she already knew that Qin Yu hadn't passed the test. When he first entered the desolate region and stepped out of the passage, Qin Yu still vividly remembered those eyes. If even a half-emperor couldn't be completely trusted, then the confirmation in the imperial palace must be even higher. If his identity was exposed, the phrase, "unable to escape even if he grew wings," was incomparably appropriate for Qin Yu. His first thought was to run away now. He was the fastest to come out, but he was also the first to be suppressed. This was the imperial capital of the Western Wasteland. There were countless hidden dragons and crouching tigers. With Qin Yu's current cultivation, if he revealed the slightest mistake, he would be immediately suppressed and even die on the spot. Since he couldn't run, he could only brace himself and walk into the imperial palace. After boarding the carriage, countless thoughts raced through his mind. Before he could sort them out, He had already arrived at the imperial palace. Qin Yu revealed a bitter smile. He took a deep breath and walked out of the carriage. If it was a blessing, it wasn't a curse. If it was a curse, he couldn't avoid it. At this point, all he could do was stabilize his mentality and try his luck. The scale of Li Yizhou's palace was astonishing, but compared to the western wasteland imperial palace, it wasn't even worth mentioning. As Qin Yu landed on the ground and saw the towering palaces in front of him, he could feel a terrifying aura that was as vast as a sea, one that was incomparably powerful and dignified. It was an invisible power that shrouded the entire imperial palace. It seemed invisible and intangible, but it was enough to instantly erupt with the power to destroy all things. This was the use of the Divine Kingdom's power. With Qin Yu's current level of contact with the Divine Kingdom, he couldn't figure out what kind of method this was. But since he could feel it, he could vaguely guess how terrifying this power was. As for how terrifying it was, Qin Yu wasn't sure. But even if it was just 1% of its strength, it would be enough to instantly crush him to pieces. Once you enter the Darch Palace, you're not allowed to make any noise, look around at will, and you are not allowed to release your cultivation recklessly. The one responsible for the handover from the imperial palace was a stooped old woman. Her face was thin and her lips were sharp and sour. As her eyes swept over Qin Yu, he felt a stabbing pain on his skin, as if countless needles were stabbing into him. This is Nanny Wu from the palace. She has been by His Majesty's side for many years. The Dark Dominator should be more respectful to her. Don't forget your etiquette. A junior colonel of the Imperial Army of the Imperial Palace said in a low voice. His tone was unkind, but he had the intention of reminding the Dark Dominator. Of course, this wasn't because he was kind-hearted, but because he had received enough benefits in the temporary imperial residence. Nanny Wu glanced at the junior colonel and said in a sharp voice, "Don't talk nonsense. We don't have much time left. Hurry up and leave with me." She turned around and walked away. Her two tightly wrapped feet seemed to be swaying, but her speed was shockingly fast. The Imperial Army Major lowered his voice. "No matter what kind of provocation you receive, you should endure it if you don't wish to die." After saying that, he waved his hand to let Qin Yu pass. Qin Yu passed through the Imperial Guards, walked into the palace gate, and soon went far behind Nanny Wu. "Your Excellency, Sixth Highness, is now on the decline. Everyone is anxious to disassociate themselves from him for fear of being implicated. I'm afraid there will be a problem if you accept his things." An Imperial Guard glanced around and said in a low voice. The junior colonel said lightly, "It doesn't matter. The Imperial Guards of the Imperial Palace have always been loyal to His Majesty alone. I'll accept the benefits, but I'm just giving a little reminder. I don't think those nobles will make things difficult for me because of such a small matter. Be that as it may, enough. Don't talk nonsense with me. In the past, you didn't show any mercy when you accepted my things. Why can't I make a small fortune today? I know you're jealous. When the shift is over, I'll treat you to a drink. You can choose the place." Amidst the laughter, a burst of cheers sounded. After a few more jokes, the Imperial Guards dispersed and returned to their posts. The junior colonel sat behind a simple table and chair. He picked up a teacup and took a sip. He frowned slightly and couldn't help but sigh. He also couldn't figure out why they still wanted to express goodwill to Sixth Highness in such a situation. Forget it. How could a mere pawn like him guess the thoughts of the adults? It turned out that Qin Yu wasn't the only one who was summoned to the Imperial Palace today to receive the final confirmation. When he arrived, there were already more than a dozen people in this square and lifeless black courtyard. Nanny Wu walked to the door and sent Qin Yu in with a cold face. She then turned around and left quietly. It was unknown whether she was going to pick up someone else. Several eyes gathered on the black robe. After a slight flicker, they revealed some strange expressions. It seemed that they had already guessed Qin Yu's identity. After all, because of the blood flag, The assassination in the capital region had become a topic of discussion and spread far and wide. They were still a little interested in the only life-saving straw in Sixth Highness's hands. Of course, interest was one thing, but these gazes didn't make one feel comfortable. They were curious, but only a small part of it. Most of them were indifference as if they were looking at an ice-cold corpse, standing in a corner of the courtyard. Qin Yu soon understood why these people were looking at him like this. Whoosh! With a burst of restlessness, Blood Flag's figure appeared outside the courtyard. He changed his arrogant attitude and respectfully bowed before turning to enter the courtyard. Coincidentally, the one who brought him here was the same Nanny Wu who had just brought Qin Yu here. It seemed that the junior colonel's warning was true. Although Nanny Wu was ugly and disgusting, she did have a high status in the imperial palace. Otherwise, with Blood Flag's personality, how could he even place a mere nanny in his eyes, let alone bow to her on his own initiative? The footsteps approached and finally stopped in front of him. Qin Yu frowned and looked up. His eyes met Blood Flag's. What a coincidence, we meet again. Blood Flag smiled, but the corners of his mouth and every wrinkle in his eyes exuded a bloodthirsty aura. He was like a starving beast that had finally found prey to fill its stomach. Qin Yu said, the vast majority of coincidences in this world aren't coincidences at all. Blood Flag snapped his fingers. Direct enough. I like it. His smile became even brighter. Moreover, what you said is correct. This isn't a coincidence. I originally didn't want to participate in this matter, but I specifically ran here because I wanted to see your face again. He leaned forward and whispered into Qin Yu's ear, Don't give me a chance, otherwise I will catch you and slowly tear you to pieces. Believe me, when it comes to these things, I am extremely experienced. If you don't suffer enough pain, it will be hard for you to die even if you want to. An icy cold and bloodthirsty aura rushed out. Qin Yu coldly said, I'm looking forward to it. Blood Flag straightened himself and smiled. He walked to the side. The several people that were near him had their complexions change, and they quietly took several steps back. In this corner of the courtyard, there was only Qin Yu and him left. Like a plague, they were isolated from the rest of the people. After a while, as the last person entered, the square courtyard with an oppressive atmosphere closed on its own with a bang, trapping everyone inside. At some unknown time, Grandma Wu had appeared in the crowd. She said in a sharp voice, Next, I will give each of you a pill. Just eat it, and you will be fine. Don't ask about the specifics. Just as her voice fell, 2 Imperial Palace guards appeared, each holding a jade plate in their hands. Each jade plate was neatly arranged with 12 Longan-sized pills. They were crimson red, as if they had been soaked in blood. A faint but sweet smell spread through the air. Everyone standing in the courtyard fell silent for a moment before stepping forwards. Blood Flag lifted a hand and swallowed the pill. He closed his eyes and savored it for a moment. Then he suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Qin Yu, a cold sneer on his face. This sneer caused Qin Yu's heart to tighten, but he didn't reveal anything on his face. He walked over to the side of the Imperial Palace guard and took the pill. He swallowed it without any hesitation. As the crimson pill entered his mouth, it instantly melted. Like a tongue of fire, it flowed down from his mouth and nose, sinking into his stomach and organs, burning away everything. At this moment, Qin Yu felt as if he had been placed within a great furnace. Every inch of his flesh and blood was burning. His blood nearly boiled over. A tremor suddenly spread out. The sun and moon force field around his soul suddenly sped up. At the same time, the Dark Emperor Crown Phantom appeared above Qin Yu's soul. The eye of eternal night embedded in the center of the crown released a cold halo of light. Flames burned his limbs and bones. Surging heat seeped into his soul. It was like a stream flowing into sand, not letting go of a single inch. There was silence in the small courtyard. Everyone that took the pill closed their eyes and fell into a half-asleep state. Crimson lines appeared on the surface of their bodies. They fused together, linking together, forming all sorts of mysterious patterns. Granny Wu's expression was solemn. She didn't know when, but two old women who wore the same clothes and had the same cold aura appeared behind her. Their 6 pairs of eyes were like dead fish pearls. They were staring at the changing patterns on everyone's body, trying to find a flaw. Suddenly, Mother Wu's eyes turned cold. She took a step forward and instantly vanished. In the next moment, she appeared in front of a black-faced cultivator. She lifted a finger and pressed it between his eyebrows. Pah! It was as if a mirror had been shattered, or as if an ice pearl had been broken. The black-faced cultivator's body split into pieces, falling to the ground and quickly rotting. It turned into a viscous liquid that corroded the ground. Immediately, a large cloud of white mist rose. With a scream, the goo on the ground suddenly exploded. A little person the size of a knuckle rushed out, screaming in pain. From its appearance, this was the shrunken version of the black-faced cultivator. Space twisted and an ancient stone door filled with a wild aura appeared. Just as the little person was about to rush in, a look of panic and despair appeared on his face. Peepa! A bolt of lightning suddenly appeared, striking the little person and instantly turning him to ashes. Chapter 1481. Under the black robe, Qin Yu's complexion changed and his heart raced. He finally understood why only 3 nannies had appeared in the imperial palace for such an important matter. It turned out that the so-called confirmation was just a formality. After all of them entered the imperial palace, they were enveloped by that power. The moment he revealed the slightest mistake, he would be directly obliterated. This was the strongest deterrent. There was no need for anything else. That bolt of lightning just now had disappeared in a flash. It did not seem powerful, but it contained a terrifying power. It could instantly kill the black-faced cultivator, and it could also directly kill Qin Yu. Furthermore, this was only an extremely small portion of the Tao power contained within that Tao power. If it erupted with all its strength, the level of power was not something Qin Yu could imagine. After this, Qin Yu was even more certain that the Western Wasteland Imperial Palace was terrifying. If he wanted to live, the only way was to hide himself and not reveal any flaws. Otherwise, there would be no chance of survival at all. Just as this thought appeared in Qin Yu's mind, his ears suddenly buzzed and a strong sense of exhaustion gushed out from the bottom of his heart. This tiredness was so strong that the moment it appeared, Qin Yu's consciousness collapsed and his thoughts became muddled. At this moment, a slight tremble suddenly spread out. It was like a drop of cold dew falling between his eyebrows, causing a chill to seep into his brain. Qin Yu suddenly woke up. After sensing the change in the strength in his body, he was filled with anger and shock. The Wasteland Territory's methods were truly impossible to guard against. That slight tremble just now came from far away, from the divine kingdom that was closely related to Qin Yu. Although it was not perfect and its strength was incomparably weak, when it faced a power of the same attribute, it was still able to give a warning. If not for this, Qin Yu's consciousness would have sunk into oblivion, and the result could be imagined. In the quiet courtyard, the cultivators with tattoos on their flesh and blood opened their eyes in a trance. Their pupils were unfocused, and they were clearly in an unconscious state. Nanny Zhou took out a black bell from her bosom. She opened her fingers, and it flew up by itself, hanging above everyone's heads. Ding-ling-ling, there was no need to activate it. The bell rang on its own, and the crisp sound spread through the air. All the cultivators, who were in a trance, opened their eyes. As the sound of the bell poured into their minds, the strength in their bodies began to uncontrollably release. At this moment, an extremely rich darkness gushed out from Qin Yu's body, wrapping him within. It was as thick as ink, as if all the darkness between the heavens and earth had converged, as if eternal night had descended. It was like an endless abyss that could devour everything. Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu's eyebrows shot up. He forcefully controlled his body and didn't respond at all. But now, all of his attention was focused on a certain cultivator to his left. It was a middle-aged man with a rather elegant demeanor. In particular, there was a red mole at the corner of his eyebrow, which added a bit of evil charm to his handsomeness. The reason why Qin Yu had such a deep impression of this person wasn't because he was a handsome middle-aged man or because he had a red up between his eyebrows. Rather, it was because this man had displayed the most intense hostility towards him since he had entered the courtyard. Although this person had hidden himself well, Qin Yu, who had transformed into the chief darkness sovereign, had an extremely keen sense. He was able to sense the icy chill in the depths of this person's eyes. Now, as this person's strength uncontrollably spread outwards, a trace of hot and cold mixed together aura gradually spread outwards. And at this time, what caught Qin Yu's attention was this aura, or to be more precise, the furnace had locked onto this aura. Because it came from a type of flame, the ice flame, this was a thought fluctuation transmitted out by the furnace. There was much more to it, such as a detailed introduction to this flame, its abilities, and so on, but this wasn't the key point. The key point was that this ice flame could be swallowed up by the furnace and help it transform further. And the transformation of the furnace meant that Qin Yu's strength would rise further. After entering the desolate region, he had seen many horrors and felt himself to be increasingly weak and insignificant. To Qin Yu, this was an irresistible temptation. At this moment, after determining that the furnace's judgment wasn't wrong, Qin Yu immediately made a decision. He would seize the ice flame. Of course, all of this was built on the premise that Qin Yu could safely pass this hurdle. Otherwise, he would die without a grave. If so, there was no need to think about anything else. Suppressing the heat and excitement in his heart, Qin Yu firmly guarded his heart. After a brief pause, he began to sense the auras of the others in the courtyard. Without a doubt, the people in the courtyard today would all participate in some matter in the future and become his competitors. In other words, they were destined to be opponents. If he could grasp information about them ahead of time, then he could make preparations early. After being affected by the Imperial Palace's potential and in a dazed state of mind, the fluctuations of strength that were naturally released could clearly expose the true situation of these people. For instance, Blood Flag. Qin Yu was sure that Blood Flag would do everything in his power to kill him. Of course, this was also what he thought. So after sweeping his divine sense over everyone and leaving behind an impression, Qin Yu focused most of his attention on Blood Flag. As for the Red who had the ice flame hidden within his body, he didn't need to spend any extra effort on him. This was because Qin Yu had already firmly remembered all of the auras that Red revealed. This was out of respect for a weak ruler-level powerhouse. He was prepared to press the other party to the ground and smash him into pieces. Of course, he had to be careful. Otherwise, if he failed to kill the other party, he would be delivering his own head in the blink of an eye. Blood Flag was strong. Qin Yu had already determined this on the day of the ambush in the capital region. But he also knew that Blood Flag hadn't revealed his true strength yet. For instance, the blood fog that gushed out from his body was thick and viscous, as if it were liquid. As it wriggled, it was like a great mouth that could open at any moment and swallow everything. Cold and awe-inspiring. Although he didn't know what secrets were hidden within this blood fog, there was no doubt that it was terrifying and fatal. As he thought, wanting to kill Blood Flag wasn't an easy matter. But the good news was that since he already knew, he could make preparations ahead of time so that he wouldn't be thrown into confusion when the time came. Suddenly, the cool strength that existed between Qin Yu's eyebrows fiercely trembled. Then it rapidly weakened and dispersed. His mind chilled, but he didn't panic too much. After experiencing the formidable potential that covered the western wasteland Imperial Palace, Qin Yu had already guessed that things wouldn't end so easily. And now he really did erupt with a backup plan. In the distant small world, It could barely be called Qin Yu's divine kingdom. All living beings that lived here could feel a powerful and vast will descend upon their minds. That was the supreme ruler they worshipped, the light that possessed boundless might and power. And at this time, the light had issued a summons. Their ruler needed the help of all their believers. You are the light, you illuminate all things. You are everywhere. You are everlasting. This incomparably loud and shameful slogan was inherited from the chicken overlord. It was a prayer that it had set up for itself to activate the sacrifice. As all the believers within the divine kingdom knelt down and chanted, its strength was thoroughly activated. Qin Yu struggled to support himself. He felt like he was a tiny boat that could capsize at any moment on a stormy sea and be torn to pieces. But this wasn't the end of it. The endless pain was like an extremely sharp knife that incessantly cut at his soul, causing terrifying wounds to appear one after another. All of this pain piled up together like an invisible mountain that wanted to overwhelm Qin Yu's will, forcing him to give up all resistance and topple over. In truth, this was an unimaginably terrifying experience. But Qin Yu could only stubbornly persist, because he knew that once he couldn't continue, he would really die. He didn't know how much time passed. It was like several short breaths of time, but it was also like time was distorted, becoming incomparably long. In the small courtyard, endless darkness shrouded him. Qin Yu's numb and low voice echoed out, carrying with it endless destruction and cruelty. I am the darkness ruler. In the next moment, all of the pressure, tearing, pain, everything that he had endured vanished from sight. Who? Qin Yu let out a long breath of relief. He could feel his robes soaked in a cold sweat. The cold and slippery feeling reminded him that he had passed this hurdle. Then, in the direction he instinctively looked, he heard Blood Flag's voice. Yi Flag! Pa! Pa! Several figures fell to the ground. The strength released from their bodies rapidly dissipated. The eyes of the corpses that were exposed were wide open. At this time, their pupils that had shrunk to the point of nervousness began to slowly disperse. Without a doubt, this meant that at the moment of their death, they had experienced something extremely terrifying. The sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air filled the small courtyard. As if awakening from a dream, the cultivators all paled, although they didn't have the strength to resist before. After the confirmation ended, the reaction of their bodies and the traces left behind were enough to prove what had happened. Mother Wu's icy voice echoed out, "This matter is of great importance, and there cannot be the slightest mistake. Today's matter has already obtained His Majesty's approval. If anyone is dissatisfied, feel free to speak up." Her dead fish eyes swept over everyone present. Wherever she passed, everyone lowered their heads. Their hearts chilled, and all the anger and resentment they felt completely dissipated. The imperial palace's will was above all else, not just because of its so-called dignity, but because the royal family was powerful and callous. After experiencing the painstaking efforts of several generations of desolate emperors, they had established a majesty that could not be provoked. Since this was His Majesty's will, even if they were all killed here, there wouldn't be any disturbances. After a moment of silence, another old woman spoke up. "Everyone, please rest assured that everything that happened here will be sealed up. Not a single thing will be revealed. We wouldn't dare." Qin Yu bowed along with everyone else. Mother Wu coldly sneered. "Today's matter has come to an end. Everyone, please return." She turned and walked away, her feet moving as she vanished from everyone's sight. Blood Flag frowned, his complexion incomparably gloomy. It was clear he was in a bad mood. He glanced at Qin Yu, but didn't say anything. He stood up and walked out. And at this time, there were already imperial palace attendants waiting outside the courtyard to lead them out. Qin Yu followed the crowd. He didn't reveal anything strange, nor did he look at Red again. In the end, he was at the weak ruler level. Perhaps a single glance was enough to arouse their vigilance. The journey was smooth. In silence, they arrived at the exit of the imperial palace. Under the cold and indifferent gazes of the imperial palace guards, they walked out. Qin Yu silently stepped out of the imperial palace. The moment his foot touched the ground, there was a light popping sound from within his body, like a bubble bursting. Chapter 1482. After returning to Li Yizhou's palace and dismissing the maids, Qin Yu sat down at the table. His body suddenly trembled, and his forehead was instantly covered with beads of sweat. He wanted to pour himself a cup of tea, but found that his fingers were shaking so badly that he spilled most of the tea on the table. With a bitter smile, he drank the hot tea and let out a long breath. Only then did he feel his stiff body recover a bit of warmth. The dot of light that the woman gave him shattered. Not long ago, the moment Qin Yu stepped out of the imperial palace, the most terrifying thing was that even now, he didn't know what had happened. But without a doubt, in a situation where he wasn't aware of it at all and wasn't prepared at all, Qin Yu had already made a trip to the gates of hell. Qin Yu had personally experienced the situation of being on the verge of death more than once, but this time was different. He didn't feel anything, which meant he didn't have the ability to resist. If it weren't for that dot of light, Qin Yu would most likely be a dead man. Being so close to death, brushing past it and being in a state of ignorance, this was the source of Qin Yu's greatest fear. After a long period of silence, Qin Yu took a deep breath. The fear and dread in his eyes were forcefully suppressed. Since he was safe and sound and had returned to Li Yizhou's palace, it meant that he hadn't been exposed. In other words, Qin Yu was safe and there was no need to worry too much. Now that Qin Yu had passed the test, the woman would soon contact him and fulfill her original promise. At the very least, Qin Yu would know what he would face next. The other thing was the ice flame. From the cautiousness of the imperial palace, it wasn't difficult to judge that what was going to happen next would be an extremely crucial matter. And this kind of matter, the degree of importance and the level of danger would inevitably be proportional. Qin Yu did this because he owed the woman too much. In addition to the great disparity in strength, there was no way he could resist, so he had no choice but to agree. In fact, he didn't want to be in any danger because of this. It was urgent to increase his strength. Since there was a shortcut in front of him, of course he had to try it. His eyes flashed. Qin Yu got up and pushed open the door. To him, this great imperial city was like a deep sea in the dark. If he wanted to find prey and complete the hunt, he naturally had to seek outside help. With his current importance to Li Yizhou, it was unlikely that he would reject this matter. The ruler of darkness, smoothly confirmed by the imperial palace. Li Yizhou revealed a happy expression. It wasn't because he wasn't shrewd enough to show his emotions, but because this matter was too important. If the ruler of darkness made a mistake, he would fall into the abyss and would never be able to rise again. So now that Qin Yu asked for an audience, he smiled and nodded. "Ruler of darkness, come in." Qin Yu walked into the hall. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Greetings, your highness. Ruler of Yu, please rise." Li Yizhou's face was full of friendliness. "The matter of the imperial palace's confirmation has really troubled you. This hall has a treasure that was bestowed by His Majesty in the early years. Today I will give it to you. In the future, it can protect you from a life or death calamity." After he finished speaking, he clapped his hands. Saint Zhou Yan walked out from behind, his eyes filled with envy. "This piece of scale armor came from my western deserts, guardian divine beast. Its defense is extremely shocking, and it can block an attack from a half-emperor. Its value is immeasurable. For His Highness to bestow such a treasure to you, it can be seen how much he values the ruler of darkness. You must work hard to live up to His Highness's good intentions." His eyes fell on the scale. It was transparent, and there were layers of fluorescent light that constantly surged across its surface. Vaguely, he could hear a sound that sounded like the roaring of a great river. "Thank you, your highness." Qin Yu received the scale with both hands. Although this wasn't part of his plans, There was no reason to reject a treasure that had been delivered to his doorstep. To be able to block a strike from a half-emperor, just this point alone was the strongest life-saving card in Qin Yu's hands. But this life-saving card could only be used once. The most important thing was to increase his own strength. Qin Yu looked up at Li Yizhou. He said, "Your Highness has bestowed such a precious treasure to me because you hope that I can do my best to help your Highness in the following matters. I am indebted to your Highness for thinking highly of me, allowing me to escape my predicament and enter the desolate region. I am filled with endless gratitude. So I came here today to ask your Highness to help me. If you can accomplish this, it will increase my chances of success." Li Yizhou's eyes brightened. "Ruler of Darkness, please speak." "Your Highness, today I entered the Imperial Palace to accept the confirmation. During the process, I discovered that someone's body was hiding something important that I needed. Immediately, Qin Yu made some changes to cover up the matter of the ice flame. A red between the eyebrows. Li Yizhou furrowed his eyebrows and looked at Saint Zhou Yan. The latter hesitated for a moment. He asked Qin Yu a few questions about this person's appearance and revealed an awkward expression. "Your Highness, if I'm not wrong, the person that the ruler of darkness mentioned is the eldest princess disciple, Ning Xiao." "Eldest princess." Li Yizhou's eyebrows furrowed even tighter and fear flashed in his eyes. Qin Yu said in a low voice, "Your Highness, the ice flame within this person's body is extremely important to me. It can help me rise in strength for a short period of time. So, no matter what, I ask that your Highness help me." He had to express his firm stance on this matter. Li Yizhou was silent for several breaths of time. Then he slowly said, "I can help you, but this matter is dangerous. Ning Xiao is tyrannically strong and is one of the peak true sages in the imperial capital. It will be difficult to kill him. There is also the eldest princess. She is the older sister of the third Highness. Because of the changes in the broken world, she hates me to the extreme. If this matter is exposed in the slightest, it will be extremely dangerous." As he spoke to her, he revealed a bit of unwillingness and anger. There was even a bit of self-deprecation in his eyes. If Li Yizhou was at his peak, he wouldn't have been too afraid of the eldest princess even if he wasn't her match. But now he was like a tiger in a flat land and his situation was incomparably difficult. Once the eldest princess brazenly attacked him, he wouldn't be able to resist at all. Saint Zhou Yan coughed lightly. "Ruler of Darkness, killing Ning Xiao is extremely risky. If you insist on acting, you must make a thorough plan to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Your Highness' strength has mostly been reduced by the Imperial Palace. The remaining portion can only protect yourself." This was a tactful way of saying things to smooth things over so that Li Yizhou wouldn't lose face. At the same time, it was also a reminder to Qin Yu about whether or not there was a need to take such a great risk. And in truth, if it weren't for Qin Yu saying that seizing the ice flame would increase his strength and increase his chances of success in the future, Li Yizhou would never have agreed to this. At such a critical juncture, he had created new problems. Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu swept his eyes over the two. His voice was resolute and decisive. "I must obtain the ice flame. As for the plan, I will have to trouble your Highness to help me gather information as soon as possible." Feeling the firm will in Qin Yu's words, Li Yizhou clenched his teeth. He said in a low voice, "Saint Zhou Yan, I will leave this matter to you. You must find a way to obtain all the information you can about Ning Xiao and give it to the ruler of darkness." He looked up. "However, I will say this in advance. I must have sufficient assurance before I act. Otherwise, I hope that the ruler of darkness can understand that I have no other choice." It was clear that if he didn't have sufficient assurance, Li Yizhou would stop him. Qin Yu wasn't just a single person right now, but also involved his future. He certainly couldn't act recklessly. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Good. Everything will be as your Highness says." He looked at Zhou Yan. "Saint, I ask that you act as soon as possible. If he really couldn't do it, he wouldn't force it. Since he knew of the existence of the ice flame, there would always be a chance in the future. If he acted blindly and hastily, then let alone killing someone and stealing their treasures, he would only be throwing his life away in vain. Reality proved that a prince was a prince in the end. Even if Li Yizhou was in a hopeless situation, he was still able to mobilize some strength. All the information regarding Ning Xiao was gathered at the fastest speed possible. It was gathered and arranged into a jade slip that Saint Zhou Yin personally handed to Qinyu, the ruler of darkness. Everything related to Ning Xiao is included in this. I hope that you will not forget the warning that His Highness gave you before. If you can't do it, do not try to be brave. His words were earnest and solemn to the extreme. Right now, Qin Yu was Li Yizhou's only hope of reversing his situation. As for Zhou Yan, he had already been tied together with Li Yizhou and had become a trusted aide of the Sixth Highness. If something happened to Li Yizhou, he would be the first one to suffer. Saint Zhou Yan, rest assured that I know what to do. Qin Yu took the jade slip. After sensing it and determining that there was nothing wrong with it, he immediately probed it with his divine sense. A moment later, his fingers tightened a little. With a light cracking sound, the jade slip was directly crushed to pieces. Across from him, Saint Zhou Yan's eyes flashed, and he revealed a relaxed expression. From this, it wasn't hard to see that the ruler of darkness was a cautious person. And when a cautious person acted, they would often consider things more carefully. After a moment of thought, Qin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. There is one matter that I need Saint Zhou Yan to confirm for me. Zhou Yan said, What is it? Saint, please investigate what Ning Xiao is doing right now. Do you know whether or not the master and servant pair come from Siwatch City? If there is anything unclear about this, you can confirm it from true Saint Baiyu. All right. Zhou Yan didn't ask any further. He turned and left. Toes for what Qin Yu said. He had already memorized the contents of the jade slip. Of course, he knew what it was referring to. The woman in Raging Moon Hall. Why was he investigating her? That wasn't right. The ruler of darkness had come to the imperial capital to borrow Siwatch City. Could there be some connection between the two? Zhou Yan moved quickly. After all, no one knew when the person chosen would leave, so he had to complete this matter as soon as possible. True, Saint Baiyu wasn't easy to contact. After all, his bloodline had considerable influence in the imperial capital. With Li Yi's current situation, if he rashly investigated his descendants, it was likely that there would be some misunderstanding and unpredictable consequences. But Saint Zhou Yan was a smart person and knew how to act in a roundabout way. After all, there were many people around true Saint Baiyu that he could try to contact. In a situation where they split up, the matter was quickly investigated. The woman that Ning Xiao had taken a liking to in Raging Moon Hall and was passionately pursuing came from Siwatch City. Moreover, this woman seemed to have been brought back to the imperial capital by true Saint Baiyu. Yun Qing. Qin Yu muttered this name. He took a deep breath and looked up. Saint, please make arrangements. I want to see her as soon as possible. Zhou Yan frowned. The ruler of darkness is confident. Qin Yu said, If there isn't an accident, Ning Xiao will be seeking his own death. He provoked me on his own initiative and was killed. I don't think there will be any trouble. I will need to report this matter to His Highness. Of course. Saint, please tell His Highness that I have a high degree of confidence. Not long after Saint Zhou Yan left, Li Yi personally came to speak with Qin Yu. After a long period of silence, he finally nodded in agreement. Ruler of darkness, remember what you promised me. Do not cause any accidents, otherwise I will not be able to save you. Your Highness, rest assured. After leaving Raging Moon Hall, she entered Raging Moon Hall again. This wasn't nonsense, but something that Yun Qing had personally experienced during this period of time. She originally thought that it was the black-robed guest who had brought her out of Siwatch City and she was prepared to give herself to this person. Although she was flustered, she didn't reject it too much. In fact, deep in her heart, there was even a trace of anticipation and joy. The conflict in Siwatch City was enough to prove that this black-robed guest was a sufficiently powerful and humane person. To a brothel girl, this was the best ending. She didn't dare to ask for anything more, but the heavens had played a joke on her. After the assassination in Gyeonggi province, true Saint Bayu had disappeared. In order to sever her connection with Qin Yun Qing had been sent to the imperial capital's raging moon hall. As her heart was filled with bitterness and hesitation, Yun Qing didn't know what fate awaited her. But at this time she had her first guest. When she saw the black-robed guest, she froze in place. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Her eyes nearly rolled out of her head. Qin Yu was a bit embarrassed. What nonsense! A jade-like beauty was looking at him from afar, her eyes filled with excitement and disbelief, as well as a bit of sorrow that was difficult to conceal. Anyone would feel a bit uncomfortable. Cough! A light cough broke the silence. Time was tight, and Qin Yu didn't want to silently stare at her. Moreover, their feelings hadn't reached that stage yet. Besides Yun Qing's face, which was exactly the same as Liao Shi's, he really didn't feel anything. Miss Yun Qing, I came here today to ask for your help with something. He went straight to the point. In the end, Yun Qing was someone who had seen the world. She took a deep breath and steadied her mind. She bowed and said, "Guest has helped me many times. If there is anything you need, please feel free to ask." Qin Yu said, "I want to kill someone, and I need Miss to put on a play with me. There might be some risks involved, but I can give Miss a sufficient reward." Yun Qing looked up, her red eyes filled with firmness. "Although I am a prostitute, I still know how to repay favors. If it weren't for Guest's rescue, Dai and I would have already died. I fear we would have become skeletons in that lake in Sea Viewing City. So, there is no need for Guest to explain, just speak frankly." Qin Yu's heart stirred for a moment before he composed himself. He looked at the stubborn face in front of him. It actually overlapped with the Liao Shi in his memories. After a brief silence, he slowly said, "Then I will thank Miss in advance." After explaining everything, Qin Yu stood up and quietly left Raging Moon Hall. He looked up at the brilliant night sky above his head. The 9 suns of the great desolate coexisted, but there was no moon at night. There was only the vast and endless sea of stars. Beneath the black robes, killing intent swirled in the depths of his eyes. Whether Yun Qing's words were true or false, Qin Yu didn't think he was wrong. Now that the plan was complete, all he needed to do was wait for Ning Xiao to jump in and deliver his head. Chapter 1483. There were 3,000 methods of cultivation in the world, and 7,000 other methods. Hence, it was said that all methods belonged to the same origin. If one were to rank them based on ferocity and brutality, Ning Xiao always believed that the art of gluttony cultivated by his lineage would definitely be one of the best. The so-called art of gluttony was the way of devouring. Of course, it was not blindly plundering. There was a strict set of standards. Only by devouring cultivators who fulfilled the requirements could one benefit from it and increase their strength. From Ning Xiao's point of view, the most difficult part of cultivating this method was to be careful. If one was controlled by the method and gradually lost their mind, the Tao Tai would take over their consciousness and devour their desires. In the end, they would bring about their own destruction. The reason was simple. There were many people in the world who met the standards but could not be touched. For example, the first princess. Her scent almost drove Ning Xiao crazy. He did not doubt that if he could devour this lady, he would be able to break through the limit and step into the realm of rulers. This was the realm that Ning Xiao dreamed of and pursued. However, he had been under the first princess tutelage for 100 years and had never dared to make a move. Not to mention the fact that he was courting death. Even if he was lucky enough to succeed, What awaited him would be the relentless pursuit of the western wilderness imperial family. The reason why Ning Xiao could live peacefully until today and have his current cultivation base was because he had always been able to maintain his calm and self-control. However, not long ago, Ning Xiao found a similar feeling from another woman. No, to be exact, it was an even stronger desire to devour. This time he was very lucky. This woman was not like the first princess, who had a noble identity that could not be offended. She also did not have a backer behind her. She was just a rather beautiful woman in a brothel. This woman's name was Yun Qing. With Yun Qing's beauty, it would not take long for her to stand out and gain the favor of all the wealthy guests in the capital. In other words, if he had discovered her a little later, it would have been troublesome to touch her. But now everything was just right. She had just entered the lunar inn in the capital and was still in a state of being kept in a boudoir. As long as he paid a high price to buy her away, Yun Qing would be at his mercy. Thinking of this, Ning Xiao's heart trembled with excitement. The carriage stopped and he lifted the curtains. His gaze fell on the rather elegant entrance of the lunar inn, and he smiled. In order to avoid revealing any abnormalities and being noticed by others, Ning Xiao forcefully suppressed her impatience. She contacted the lunar inn a few times and expressed her strong will. Today he would hesitate and agree to lunar inn's offer to keep Yun Qing in his hands. Taking a deep breath, Ning Xiao stepped out of the carriage. Her heart was filled with excitement, but soon after, Ning Xiao's heart felt as if someone had poured a bucket. Yun Qing's, he said slowly. Looking at the thin, middle-aged man with an apologetic smile, Ning Xiao's eyes were as cold as a knife. She slowly said, "Who is it?" Being locked onto by such a terrifying gaze, the middle-aged man's smile did not change. His tone was calm and gentle. "Guest, you should know that our Advent Moon Brothel has always valued the privacy of our guests the most. So this matter we really have no comment. Yun Ning. Ning Qing, Ning. Ning Qing, Ning. Ning that Yun, Ning, men Ning people." But he didn't dare. Although this man seemed to be the leader of a mere lunar inn, behind him was a distant branch of an imperial family. Even the eldest princess wouldn't be willing to provoke him in her current state. Ning Xiao took a deep breath and cupped his hands together. "You should know my background. Yun Qing is a woman I value greatly. If you can tell me, I will owe Lunar in a favor." This was his promise. As a subordinate of the eldest princess and someone who was highly regarded, he believed the other party understood the weight of this. In particular, he had entered the imperial palace not long ago. This wasn't a secret that the upper echelons of the imperial capital couldn't inquire about. The middle-aged man hesitated. "Then I ask Mr. Ning to send my regards to the eldest princess." Ning Xiao's eyes brightened. "Of course." The middle-aged man smiled. "The one who bought Miss Yun Qing is Saint Zhou Yen, 6th Highness's attendant. He just left a moment ago." Ning Xiao cupped his hands together and left. He frowned, a dark look in his eyes. 6th Highness. Although the other party was like a grasshopper at the end of autumn, he was still an imperial prince. Unless the imperial palace gave the order, no one dared to act rashly. And because of the accident that befell 3rd Highness, the eldest princess and 6th Highness were like fire and water. His identity as the eldest princess' trusted aide would only have the opposite effect. His thoughts raced. Ning Xiao took a deep breath. Whatever. No matter what, he had to obtain Yun Qing. In front of Li Yizhou's palace, Zhou Yen sat in a carriage. He suddenly raised an eyebrow, a look of surprise on his face. He originally thought that this plan was very crude, but he didn't think it would actually work. Looking back at the carriage behind him, Saint Zhou Yen really didn't understand. She was just a beautiful brothel girl. So how could she have such magical powers? Ning Xiao greets Saint Zhou Yen. A calm voice sounded from outside. Zhou Yen calmed himself down. He stepped down from the carriage and bowed. So it's Saint Ning Xiao. I wonder why you are here today. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of coldness and alienation. This was a very normal matter. Who in the imperial capital didn't know of the conflict between the eldest princess and Sixth Highness? Looking at the imperial capital who wanted to see Li Yizhou beyond redemption the most, the eldest princess would definitely be ranked in the top 3. Ning Xiao was her trusted aide. For him to appear in front of Li Yizhou's palace and stop Zhou Yan's carriage, no matter how one looked at it, he didn't have good intentions. Ning Xiao could clearly feel the coldness from the other side. After a moment of silence, he said, "May I ask Saint Zhou Yan, did you take Miss Yun Qing away?" Zhou Yan frowned, a dark expression on his face. What a good descending moon pavilion. To think that they have learned to judge others based on their own judgment. Do they really think that His Highness can be bullied at will? Although he didn't answer, his performance had undoubtedly given the answer. Ning Xiao cupped his hands together. "Saint Zhou Yan, please calm your anger. I did not come here today on the orders of the eldest princess. I have no ill intentions at all." He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "To be honest, I fell in love with Miss Yun Qing at first sight. I wanted to redeem her freedom today, but I was a step too late. After hearing the news, I chased her all the way here, hoping that Saint Zhou Yan could be magnanimous and give Miss Yun Qing to me. Of course, to express my apology and sincerity, I am willing to pay 3 times the price." Zhou Yan frowned, a look of suspicion on his face. He didn't expect such a situation. Is what Saint Ning Xiao said true? Slightly delighted, Ning Xiao's tone became even more sincere. "Everything I said is true. I am not lying at all. I hope that Saint can fulfill my wish. I will definitely keep it in mind." Zhou Yan remained silent. It was obvious that he was tempted. Just as Ning Xiao was about to continue speaking, a voice suddenly sounded. "Saint Zhou Yan, I asked you to bring Miss Yun Qing back. You don't seem to have the right to deal with her." Ning Xiao's expression changed slightly. He suddenly looked up and saw the black-robed man walking out of the palace. A dark look instantly appeared in the eyes of the black-robed man. "It's him." Saint Zhou Yan coughed lightly and revealed an awkward expression. "The ruler of darkness is just a woman from a brothel. She's not worth mentioning. Why don't you give her to Saint Ning Xiao?" As he spoke, he gave Ning Xiao a look, indicating for him to nod in agreement. Ning Xiao coughed lightly and suppressed his emotions. He smiled. "Ruler of darkness, I met you in the imperial palace that day." After a slight pause, he said, "If you are willing to give Miss Yun Qing away today, I guarantee that I will repay you in the future." His words were extremely sincere. Qin Yu sneered inwardly. Repay what? To leave her corpse intact, or to be chopped into pieces? As if I would believe you. Of course, even if everything Ning Xiao said today was true, Qin Yu would not agree. Unless this fellow was willing to hand over the ice flame on the spot, Qin Yu might consider it, but it was clear that this was impossible. Thus, the plan had to continue. Under the black robe, Qin Yu's cold voice sounded. "Sorry, Yun Qing is my woman. I don't have the habit of selling my woman in exchange for favors." He turned and left. "Saint Zhou Yan, Your Highness probably doesn't want to see Saint Ning Xiao here. Aren't you going to send us off?" "Ruler of darkness," Ning Xiao shouted. "I hope that you can seriously consider this. Don't make a decision you will regret because of a moment of impulse." Qin Yu's voice was even colder. "I have never regretted it." Ning Xiao glared at him. His robes fluttered without wind, and a terrifying aura broke out from his body. Qin Yu's eyebrows rose up. He was really looking forward to Ning Xiao brazenly attacking here. Attacking a prince's palace, this crime wouldn't cause any trouble even if he killed him. He would be able to take the next step, but it was clear that Ning Xiao wasn't an idiot. Even though he was excited and his aura leaked out, he still maintained his calm. He sneered and turned to leave, his figure soon vanishing from sight. The carriage entered the palace, and everyone left. Saint Zhou Yin bitterly smiled. Ruler of darkness, it seems that Ning Xiao is serious. Let me confirm with you once more. Do you really have confidence? Qin Yu said, don't worry. As long as he enters the trap, I will make sure he dies 10 times over. Saint Zhou Yin let out a breath, worry still on his face. I hope so. I still have to report to His Highness. Farewell. Watching Zhou Yin leave in a hurry, Qin Yu looked at his residence. His eyes flashed, and he stepped inside. Yun Qing and Little Butterfly were standing in the courtyard at a loss. As they saw him enter, they quickly stood up and bowed. Greetings, guest. Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Qin Yu. Your current identity to the outside world is that of a woman by my side. Be careful not to be too distant to avoid others' suspicions. My surname is Qin. From now on, you can call me Mr. Qin. Yes. Yun Qing and Little Butterfly respectfully bowed. Qin Yu nodded. What you need to do has been completed. Rest in peace and stay here. I still have matters to attend to. That's all. He stood up and left. It wasn't that he didn't want to say a few more words to these two beauties, but that Yun Qing's teacher Liao face made him feel uneasy. Moreover, why was she so sure that Ning Xiao had fallen for her trap? This Yun Qing seemed to be hiding some secret. Qin Yu flicked his sleeves and directly sealed off the inside and outside. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Now, you should come out and give me a good explanation, right? Chapter 1484. There was silence in the room. In a situation where he was talking to himself, it was only natural that such a scene would occur. Qin Yu sneered from beneath his black robes. He clenched his teeth. Do you really think that I don't dare to give up? Don't push me too far, otherwise we'll all fall apart. There's a high chance I won't have a good ending, but don't think you'll have an easy time either. A light tremble sounded out in his ears. Then, Qin Yu felt his chest heat up. His flesh and blood seemed to be cut open by a red-hot blade, as if he were a candle melting under high temperatures. Fragments of light flew out, condensing in front of him. As this happened, the space in the room was completely sealed. In the next moment, a blinding light bloomed. When it was extinguished, the ruler's graceful figure appeared in front of Qin Yu. Brat, what did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly. How about repeating it to me again? Qin Yu met the ruler's unkind gaze and coughed. Since you've already appeared, let's get straight to the point and not waste any more time. After all, even for the ruler, secretly descending into the Western Wasteland's imperial capital isn't an easy matter. A man had to be hard when he needed to be hard and soft when he needed to be soft. This was what it meant to judge the situation. Humph! The ruler sneered. I don't have much time left, so what do you want to know? Ask now. Qin, you didn't have the time to bother with the ruler's words. He took a deep breath and said, What did I come to the Western Wasteland for? The response of the imperial palace was enough to determine just how important this matter was. Meddling in this was dangerous to begin with, and Qin Yu also had another mission on his back. If he didn't even understand what was going on and rashly interfered, that would be no different from seeking death. The ruler lightly said, The great Desolate's 9 regions have a long inheritance and have ruled the world together since ancient times. But that doesn't mean that there are no others outside of the 9 regions. With north, south, east, and west as the boundaries, the Great Desolate region is the land of the barbarians. Let me remind you here that the barbarians are the mortal enemies of the Great Desolate. The two sides cannot coexist in this world, and there is no possibility of subduing them. The only thing that can be done is to constantly kill and weaken them until they are forever suppressed. His words were filled with thick killing intent. Qin Yu's heart chilled. He didn't know just how terrifying this barbarian race was that they could become enemies with the Great Desolate lands. Moreover, from the meaning behind these words, it seemed that even if they gathered the strength of the 9 regions of the Great Desolate lands, they would only be able to suppress them. They wouldn't be able to eliminate them once and for all. But this didn't seem to have anything to do with what he was asking. Qin Yu frowned. I will remember the matter of the Goliaths. Please continue. The sovereign lord glanced over. The western part of the western wastelands is the land of the western barbarians. A long time ago, an incomparably powerful ancient barbarian kingdom was born there. Its national strength was incredible, and it was famous for a time. It even invaded the western wastelands and killed countless people. In the end, after a difficult and cruel war and paying a huge price, the Waste region finally defeated and completely destroyed the ancient Man Kingdom. Since then, the Western barbarians have fallen into a period of weakness. Until today, they have been suppressed, unable to resist. This time, the place you're going to is the ruins of the ancient Man Kingdom. To be exact, it's the tomb of the last and strongest king of the ancient Man Kingdom. In the past, the ancient Man Kingdom was incomparably powerful. It nurtured a powerful national destiny and poured it into a rare treasure of the ancient Man Kingdom. They hoped to use this treasure to help the ancient Man King advance a step further and become a Saint Emperor. Later, the ancient Man Kingdom was destroyed and the ancient Man King was killed. However, this rare treasure that contained the ancient Man Kingdom's national destiny went missing. It is rumored that it is in this tomb. Qin Yu's eyes lit up. Your goal is this rare treasure. The sovereign lord rolled his eyes and mocked. Do you need to use such a tone to say something that is already out in the open? Qin Yu wasn't in the mood. He didn't care about her current attitude. He only felt a heavy pressure in his chest and bitterness in his mouth. The tomb of the last king of the ancient Man Kingdom. Just from the name alone, one could tell that it must be extremely dangerous inside. Not to mention, there were many people in the western wastelands. Putting aside Blood Flag, the things Qin Yu was about to do were all his opponents. To obtain the rare treasure of the Goliaths, complete the task that the sovereign lord entrusted to him, and then escape unscathed no matter how he thought about it. This was a nearly impossible task. It might be a bit of an exaggeration to say that there was no chance of survival, but it was only a bit, because the chances of success were close to zero. The sovereign lord sneered. What? Are you afraid already? She paused for a moment and said, I haven't told you the truly terrifying part. The Goliath Imperial Tomb is deep within the Western Wastelands territory. Even though the Western Wastelands have constantly expanded their territory these past years, they are still far away. After entering the Western Wastelands territory, there are no transmission arrays that can be used. Once you are exposed along the way, you will be surrounded and killed by the Western Wastelands. If that really happens, I advise you to commit suicide as soon as possible. This is because you absolutely don't want to see yourself fall into the hands of the Western Wastelands and what your final fate will be. These words were horrifying no matter how he listened to them. Qin Yu clenched his teeth. This junior is very puzzled. Why are you telling me all of this? Do you want to use this to scare me away? Fine. I admit that I am indeed a bit frightened by the sovereign lord right now. So, how about we withdraw from here? The sovereign lord lightly said, You can try. Qin Yu. Her words were calm, but he could sense that they were full of threats. Moreover, she was serious. Qin Yu didn't doubt that if he abandoned this task, she would turn around and report him to the Western Wastelands so that he would die without a grave. Cough. Don't worry, I was just joking, since I promised you. I will naturally do my best. The sovereign lord's smile was bright. I believe you. She winked. So, if there is anything else you want to ask, please hurry up. Qin Yu said, Concerning the Western Savage Imperial Tomb, is there anything you can tell me? The sovereign lord shook her head. I don't know much about this place. The Western Savage Imperial Tomb only has some vague information. For instance, the name of this imperial tomb is called Santadu by the Western Savage Imperial Tomb. According to our interpretation, it means the abyss of the night. She paused and looked at Qin Yu. And this is the reason why you were brought to the desolate region. I don't need to explain the specifics. Qin Yu had a thoughtful look. Are you saying that there is a terrifying dark strength hidden within the Western savage imperial tomb? The sovereign lord nodded. It seems so, but as for the specifics, I cannot guarantee anything. Qin Yu calmed down a little. Since the Western desolate knew of the existence of the Western savage imperial tomb and had locked onto the rare treasure within, they must have confirmed it to a certain degree. Thus, this was why Li Yizhou thought of him and regarded the Dark Sovereign as his final straw. Unless the previous desolate sovereign behind Li Yizhou had played a great joke on him. Otherwise, this matter was highly believable. In other words, once he entered the Western savage imperial tomb, the Dark Sovereign version of Qin Yu would have a greater chance of surviving. Kacha! A light sound suddenly came from the sovereign lord's body. Her figure blurred and she yawned, a tired expression on her face. All right, if there is nothing else, I will be leaving first. Wait, Qin Yu hurriedly said. Did you notice anything about Yun Qing? The sovereign lord frowned. What do you mean? It's very simple. Why are you so sure that Yun Qing can lure Ning Xiao into a trap? Is there some secret hidden on her body? Two identical faces. Was it really just a coincidence? Or was there some connection between Yun Qing and Liao Shi? Originally, Qin Yu thought it was the former, but after the Ning Xiao incident, he couldn't help but think more. Qin Yu took a deep breath and said, I once asked the sovereign lord about Liao Shi, and he said that she is a very important friend to me. So regarding this matter, I hope that you can tell me the truth without hiding anything. Facing his burning gaze, the sovereign lord yawned again. You are overthinking things. I really don't know who Liao Shi is, but this girl Yun Qing does have some secrets hidden on her body. As for what they are, unless you want to sleep with her, there is no need to know. Or if you really do sleep with her, then you will naturally know what secrets she is hiding. So there is no need to waste your breath on this matter. I am tired. Let's leave it at that. Pa! With a light sound, the sovereign lord's graceful figure vanished from sight like a bubble. Qin Yu's eyes revealed disappointment. He was originally looking forward to hearing a different answer from the sovereign lord. Liao Shi really didn't leave a single trace behind. Had she completely vanished from his life like this? Qin Yu's complexion was a bit gloomy and his chest felt increasingly heavy. There was a sense of oppression and bitterness towards the future, as well as bursts of emptiness and soreness. These conflicting feelings coexisted at the same time. This didn't feel good at all. He really had been overthinking things. He took a deep breath and suppressed all the fluctuations in his mood. After a long time, he slowly exhaled and looked up once more. His complexion had returned to normal. Since this matter had nothing to do with Liao Shi, then there was no need to spend too much energy on this matter. The Western barbarians, Qin Yu softly said. He suddenly thought of the Western Border Army General Jiang Qingzi, who had entered his line of sight because of true Saint Baiyu. He had once said that the Western barbarians were constantly moving and that they were in a stalemate with the border army. Could this be related to the Western barbarian imperial tomb? Moreover, there was the rare barbarian treasure that the sovereign lord had mentioned. It had fused with a portion of the ancient barbarian kingdom's national destiny. Although the sovereign lord hadn't mentioned its true function, it was inextricably linked to breaking through realms and increasing one's cultivation. Although she was a woman, the more Qin Yu came into contact with the sovereign lord's strength, the more he felt it. She was indeed a true powerhouse. Putting aside everything in the past, just the fact that she had silently descended into the western wasteland imperial capital without anyone noticing was already amazing enough. Such a powerhouse had painstakingly schemed to obtain the rare western barbarian treasure. And thinking about the attitude of the western wasteland imperial palace, could it be related to a higher level, a half-emperor? Although it hadn't been long since he entered the desolate region, and the information he knew was limited, through his conversation with true Saint Baiyu and the information he had gathered over the past few days, It wasn't hard for Qinyu to conclude that the emperor level was the highest level of existence in the desolate region, Great World. For example, Sakura, who was guarding the passage. The impression that Qinyu had of skies was still vivid in his mind. If I can obtain this item. This thought instantly popped up in Qinyu's mind, but it was forcefully suppressed in the next moment. This was because he knew that if he really swallowed this rare barbarian treasure, the greatest possibility was that he would explode. It was important to know one's own limits. Of course, although Qinyu suppressed his greed, he would act according to the situation. If there was a chance, then he could only apologize to the Sovereign Lord. Chapter 1485. The desolate domain was filled with experts. Over the endless years, countless people were born, and the number of people who died was also astonishing. Some were buried in the wilderness, their great Taos collapsing and returning to heaven and earth. Some were collected and gathered in one place. Although the vast majority of experts died outside, the part that was collected was still a huge number. And the place where they were gathered was called the Illusion of Mount Tang, one of the top cultivation, holy lands in the West Desolate. Inside the Illusion of Mount Tang, there were countless great Taos fragments that were produced after the death of experts. After special processing, they represented endless opportunities for cultivation. And this opportunity had a name, Epiphany. It was like a misty drizzle, like the early morning of autumn and winter. The road ahead was hazy, and suddenly a cool feeling fell between the eyebrows, and the road ahead could be seen clearly. For cultivators, especially those who had opened up the great Taos and reached the Nirvana realm and above, if they could see the road ahead clearly, it was equivalent to finding the right direction to work towards. One step at a time, diligently cultivating, they could gradually improve their strength and reach the threshold of a higher realm. The importance of this was obvious. Therefore, the Illusion of Mount Tang was also called the Dragon Gate of the Ruler Realm. As long as one entered it, it was equivalent to obtaining the opportunity to break through to the Ruler Realm. And now, within a small circle of the upper echelons of the kingdom, there was a piece of news that the Illusion of Mount Tang would open soon. Anyone who had the qualifications and certain chance to obtain a spot was doing their best to try. Once they succeeded, it meant that their side had the possibility of producing a ruler-level expert. Even if there was only a small possibility, it was worth fighting for. The cultivation level of the desolate domain was extremely high, and there were indeed countless experts born there. But saints were considered experts, and rulers could rule over large territories. For example, the previous Guanhai city, Lord Chen Yuanshan. Even if he was likely to hide his strength, he was at most a ruler level. And this directly showed that the status of a ruler in the desolate domain was enough to dominate a region and become the leader of a large family. Any side would do their best to fight for a ruler-level expert. For example, Li Yizhou and even the first princess would condescend to show due respect. Just as business was booming in every high-end venue in the capital, and the streets of some high-class residences were bustling with traffic, Qinyu received a token from the imperial palace. This token meant that when the Illusion of Mount Tang opened, he had the right to enter directly. Li Yizhou came over personally. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Regarding the upcoming matter, it involves some secrets, so I can't tell you for the time being. The opening of the Mountain Tang Mirage is a reward for you in advance. The ruler of darkness must grasp this opportunity and strive to improve further." He raised his head, his eyes bright and sharp. "So, let's put the matter of Ning Shao aside for the time being. The Illusion of Mount Tang is the most important thing now." Beneath the black robes, Qinyu frowned. This was probably what it meant to say that plans couldn't keep up with changes. He had already prepared all the follow-up plans. All he had to do was wait for Ning Shao to send herself to death, and then he would be able to successfully seize the frost flame. But who would have thought that the imperial palace would suddenly announce that they would open the Illusion of Mount Tang? He already knew about the situation here, so he naturally understood Li Yizhou's stance. In his opinion, as long as Qinyu honestly entered Tang Mountain's dreamland, he would surely obtain some harvests. Compared to killing Ning Xiao, seizing the frost flame was undoubtedly safer and more reliable. Moreover, the matter of Tongshen's dreamland seemed to be outside of his expectations. Otherwise, Li Yi would have mentioned it before and wouldn't have personally appeared at the last moment to have Qin Yu give up on his killing plan. Seeing the black-robed figure fall silent, Li Yizhou said in a low voice, "Chief Sovereign of Darkness, I know that you are unwilling to accept this, but there will be opportunities in the future to kill. Promise me that you will enter the illusion of Mount Tang obediently and not cause any more trouble." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Yes, Your Highness." Li Yizhou left in satisfaction. After obtaining Qin Yu's guarantee, he didn't believe that Qin Yu would dare to deceive him. After all, the ruler of darkness came from the broken world and was now a thorn in the side of everyone. Countless people wanted to kill him. If they didn't want to die, they could only live with him. As for whether or not Qin Yu would betray them, Li Zhou was indeed afraid, but he believed that the dark ruler wasn't an idiot. If he was truly consigned to eternal damnation, there would always be a way to pull him down into the abyss. The room fell silent. Qin Yu sighed. Did he really have to let go like this? As if sensing Qin Yu's thoughts, the furnace began to shake, sending out an intensely dissatisfied thought. Qin Yu rubbed his temples. "I know you are unwilling, but I am the same, although I promise not to do anything. If Ning Xiao comes to die on her own initiative, there might still be a chance." A sharp light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. He narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment. Now, he could only see whether or not Yun Qing's attraction to him was strong enough. As if dissatisfied, the chief sovereign of darkness ordered all the servants to withdraw. Then, with a gloomy aura around him, he entered Yun Qing's courtyard. The next day, the maid Xiao Dai came out of the courtyard with a pile of torn clothes in her arms. Soon, news spread throughout the palace that the chief sovereign of darkness had pampered the two maidservants for a single night, staying up all night to seek pleasure. 2 hours later, the maid responsible for cleaning up the mess inside and outside the palace hurriedly stuffed several bundles of rags into a pile of rubble. Moments later, the rubble was lifted and the rags were taken away. Soon they left the palace. Ning Xiao examined the rags in front of her. She lifted a hand to her nose and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes, his body shivering. Perhaps it was because he was holding his breath, but his face was flushed red. After several breaths of time, Ning Xiao opened his eyes, a cruel light flashing in them. "I've caught you." He hesitated for a moment and then walked outside. Soon, he arrived outside a grand hall and bowed. "I'll have to trouble you to pass on a message. Ning Xiao requests an audience with the great princess." The guards outside swept their cold eyes over him. One of them went inside to report. Soon this person returned. "Please." Ning Xiao tidied up his clothes and hurried into the hall. He didn't dare to look up. He respectfully knelt to the ground and said, "Ning Xiao greets the great princess." "Rise." A cold voice sounded out in his ears. The great princess, sitting in the highest position, was an absolute beauty. However, her aura was cold, as if she were carved from ice. Her eyes were like the deep sea, calm without any waves. Ning Xiao stood up. His head was still lowered, showing enough awe. This wasn't just because of the great princess' noble status, but also because of the fear he felt towards her. "What's the matter?" Ning Xiao took a deep breath and said, "Great princess, I found a woman a few days ago. This woman has a power in her body which is very helpful to my cultivation. However, she was taken by the Master of Darkness under the 6th Highness." He paused for a moment, and his eyes swept over vaguely. "The illusion of Mount Tang is about to open. I hope to get the great princess's help to kill the Master of Darkness in it." He didn't dare to hide this matter. In fact, as long as the great princess was willing, she could find out everything. The hall was quiet. Ning Xiao looked calm, but his heart gradually grew uneasy. Fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, then gathered together and slid down his cheeks. With a soft paw sound, it fell to the ground and shattered. It seems that you have found a target that fulfills the conditions of devouring. The Tao Tai technique is indeed an exquisite cultivation technique. The great princess's calm voice sounded. It was like thunder in Ning Zhao's ears. His face instantly turned pale, and he knelt on the ground. Great princess! He never thought that the secret that he had been painstakingly guarding had long been known. The great princess looked at him, and a cold glint flashed in the depths of her indifferent eyes. All these years, the greed in your eyes when you look at me has never diminished. If it was someone else, they might have killed you long ago, but I won't. You are very smart. You know what I want to do. So I will help you and give you a chance to kill the Master of Darkness. But remember, you only have one chance. If you can't kill him, you don't need to come back. Without a doubt, the illusion of Mount Tang was in the world, but its true location had never been exposed. This was because every time the illusion of Mount Tang was opened, the target would be pulled in directly. The process was silent, and there were no abnormal fluctuations. And the medium to pull people in was the token. Buzz! The token in Qin Yu's hand suddenly vibrated, and the space around it fluctuated. It was like a huge mouth that swallowed him. Just like that, his entire person disappeared. Not long after, Sage Zhouyan rushed over. He opened the door and saw that it was empty inside. He couldn't help but reveal a look of envy. Mount Tang's illusion. Unfortunately, he didn't have the qualifications to enter it. His vision blurred, and he fell into darkness. After several breaths of time, light bloomed, and Qin Yu discovered that he had arrived in a strange world. With a thought, his divine sense broke out of his body. But soon, it seemed to fall into a swamp. The surrounding space violently twisted, like an invisible net was being attacked by the fish in the net. And now, Qin Yu is this fish. What twisted the net was his divine sense. Qin Yu frowned. Then he composed himself and gained a bit more understanding of the illusion of Mount Tang. Illusion, this in itself indicated that this place was real, but it was also nothingness. Or, it was more accurate to say that it had both the characteristics of nothingness and reality. And more importantly, this was indeed a holy land for cultivation. Just now, when Qin Yu's divine sense broke out of his body and twisted the surrounding space, he could clearly feel countless fluctuations. They couldn't be seen with the naked eye, but in the perception of his divine sense, they were like shining stars in the deep night sky. As expected, every single star that existed in his perception was condensed into form from the remaining grand Tao fragments of a formidable cultivator that perished. Qin Yu finally understood why the illusion of Mount Tang could be called the peak holy land for cultivation, because it could help cultivators enter a state of sudden enlightenment. In truth, the principle was simple. As long as one poured their divine sense into these stars, they could resonate with the great Tao fragments. Before, it was said that the illusion of Mount Tang was formed because it gathered the remnant great Tao fragments of a massive number of powerhouses, and this massive was an exaggeration, but a massive number. To borrow a rather cliché phrase, there would always be something that suited you. Once you found it, the star that contained the remnant great Tao would burn itself, illuminating the road ahead for you. This was the source of sudden enlightenment. Qin Yu truly admired the person who created the illusion of Mount Tang. He had such daring and daring. To put it bluntly, as long as the illusion of Mount Tang existed, the Western wilderness could continuously produce a massive number of rulers. After all, even if only 10% of the people obtained a harvest every time the illusion opened, it would still be an incomparably astonishing number. Chapter 1486. Should I cultivate here? Nonsense, of course he should. What Qin Yu wanted to do the most right now was to cut off the head that came to him on its own initiative. But whether or not this head would come, he didn't have absolute confidence. After all, no matter how much he did, Things might not necessarily develop in the direction he wanted them to. In the end, he had to be prepared. If he couldn't kill someone, then he could use the Tang Mountain illusion to illuminate his own road of cultivation. That would be a tremendous harvest. At this time, a strange fluctuation suddenly spread out from Qin Yu's body. It was the stone pagoda. Hum! Space shook, and the phantom of the stone pagoda slowly squeezed out. It constantly trembled and seemed much more illusory than before. It was like there was some invisible barrier of strength within the Tang Mountain illusion that was suppressing any outside strength from entering. Qin Yu frowned. "What are you doing?" If the stone pagoda squeezed its way in, it must have discovered something. Towards this fellow that had eaten far too much and was nearly omniscient. Qin Yu placed a great deal of importance on him. "I discovered something, so I'm trying it out. Although I don't have too much confidence right now if I succeed." The stone pagoda didn't finish speaking, but Qin Yu could clearly sense the excitement in its eyes. To speak in such a secretive manner with a vague meaning, this was indeed an incomparably irritating matter, especially at this time. Qin Yu coldly glanced at it. He didn't want to waste his breath on the stone pagoda. If it wanted to do something, then it could do whatever it wanted. He sat down cross-legged, and all of his divine sense broke out from his body, sweeping through the surrounding space like a raging tide. In the massive distortions, radiant stars appeared, communicating with Qin Yu's divine sense. But soon, Qin Yu helplessly discovered that because he walked the true divinity Tao and the great Tao within his body was tempered by a great furnace, this sort of communication was extremely inefficient. And more importantly, even if he did obtain some harvests, in a situation where his understanding of the great Tao was still quite vague, there was no way he could use this to illuminate the road ahead. To sum it up simply, Qin Yu's current cultivation realm didn't have the qualifications to enter the Tang Mountain illusion. In other words, this place didn't match his strength, causing the effects of his cultivation to be greatly reduced. This was indeed a matter that made one feel slightly awkward and a little embarrassed. Qin Yu sighed. Just as he was about to open his eyes and retract his divine sense, his complexion suddenly changed. The torrent of divine sense swept out and locked onto one of the stars in a distorted space. Compared to the surrounding areas, its light was clearly dimmer and its volume was much smaller. Clearly, its original owner wasn't very strong. Or perhaps after death, the great Tao violently collapsed, only leaving behind an extremely small portion that was severely damaged. As it turned out, the reason was the latter, because at this moment, Qin Yu could clearly feel the flavor of time from this dim and weak star. That was the law of time. The space Tao was the symbol of the Paramitha, true saint, and the time Tao was the key to opening the door to the sovereign realm. Qin Yu's understanding of the time laws had always been at an elementary level. In other words, he had just grasped it and hadn't made any further progress. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue improving it. It was because he couldn't find a way to improve it. But this star seemed to give Qin Yu a chance. Although he couldn't use Mountain Tang's illusion to illuminate his own road of the great Tao, if he could galvanize this star that contained the time laws, he might be able to obtain an unexpected harvest. Let's do it! Bang! Qin Yu's divine sense erupted. It was like a flood converging from all directions, all of it pouring into the dim star. The dim and weak star suddenly brightened. It constantly swallowed and expanded, taking off the outer coat that concealed its essence. It was effective. Qin Yu's lips curved up in a smile. As the star was galvanized and the time laws began to flow, a straight line formed from spatial distortions stretched out from the distance, straight towards where Qin Yu was. Ning Xiao was hurrying along. He could clearly feel the stars that appeared in the distorted space around him. Several of these stars even gave him an incomparably compatible feeling. Ning Xiao believed that as long as he stopped and poured his divine sense into them, he would definitely obtain some harvests. To a cultivator, it was extremely difficult to push away the temptation of ascension that was right at the tip of their tongue. But Ning Xiao had done it. First, It was said before that his willpower was extremely strong, thus he was able to maintain his calm and self-control. Second, the temptation of Yunqing was even greater. He was well aware of his goal. As long as he could kill the Darkness Sovereign, Li Yizhou would find it difficult to protect himself and Yunqing would be in his hands. At that time, he could swallow up Yunqing, and everything he sacrificed today would be worth it. And now he was hurrying on his way to kill the Darkness Sovereign. As for whether or not he could succeed, Ning Xiao didn't doubt this at all. The Taotai law that he cultivated wasn't just about eating. The star of time was burning. Qin, you could clearly feel that his control over the time laws was rapidly rising at a visible speed. This was a wonderful feeling. It was like he had directly inherited the strength of the original master of this star. And this unknown deceased person clearly had extremely deep and exquisite attainments in the time laws. To be able to cultivate the time laws to such a level was absolutely not something a saint could accomplish. In other words, if there was an accident, then the deceased person who left behind the star of time was at least at the ruler realm. Without a doubt, this was Qin Yu's lucky chance. But he also knew that if Ning Xiao really didn't want to give up on Yunqing, then he would surely be on his way here right now. Qin Yu believed that he wouldn't miss out on this chance to kill him. Just as Qin Yu had tried his best to improve his strength before the Western Savage Imperial Tomb opened, Ning Xiao must have also been thinking about this application download address. Whether this person was far away or close, perhaps Ning Xiao would jump out at any moment and interrupt Qin Yu's lucky chance. Faster! A little faster! There was no reason for this, but the restlessness and urgency that filled his heart seemed to indicate something. Qin Yu chose to believe his own intuition. Shua! Qin Yu opened his eyes. He lifted a hand and pointed forward. As his finger fell, space suddenly gave off an incomparably strange feeling. It seemed as if everything was the same as before and nothing had changed. But quietly, some unknown change had occurred. Bang! The flames on the surface of the blazing star suddenly rose up. Then it melted and decomposed at an even faster speed, completely fusing into Qin Yu's body. Time quietly passed. Finally, the fiercely burning star exhausted the last bit of its strength. It was extinguished and dissipated. Strong winds blew up. The space in front of Qin Yu suddenly collapsed inward, forming violent distortions. This was because the phenomenon formed by the dissipation of the star of time. Once the surrounding stars finished moving and filled in the empty space, everything would naturally return to normal. Once the empty space was filled in, everything would naturally return to normal. And it just so happened that Ning Xiao saw this phenomenon. He was well aware of what this represented. His complexion changed and endless jealousy gushed out from the depths of his eyes. Then, this jealousy turned into burning greed. To smoothly find their target and refine a star was the greatest dream of all cultivators that entered Mount Tang's dreamland. This meant that they had already obtained the most crucial harvest, to illuminate their own path forward on the great Tao. But this wasn't a problem. As long as he killed the Dark Sovereign and swallowed him up with the Taotai technique, then everything this person had would belong to him. And he had come here to kill people to begin with. Killing intent exploded in his eyes. But in the next moment, Ning Xiao's complexion changed because as he rushed in, he could feel the seemingly calm but actually astonishing changes in the space. That was time. As a peak existence of the Saint Realm, Ning Xiao had foolishly looked up at the ruler realm for many years. He had made countless attempts to break through, and although he had failed every time, he had accumulated an extremely rich experience. For instance, he was well aware of what the time laws meant to the ruler realm. The reason a ruler was called a ruler was because they had the qualifications to rule over their own lands and were called the overlords that supported the heavens. This was because they controlled time and space. Their entire body was their own domain, and they could control everything with just a thought. Space was easy to obtain, but time was hard to find. This threshold had cut off countless people's chances of making further breakthroughs. They were stuck at the peak of the Saint Realm, unable to rise any further. But now Ning Xiao could feel the fluctuations of the time laws in space that hadn't yet dissipated. In addition to the remnant aura and the phenomenon he saw just now, it wasn't hard to guess what had happened just now. Just before he arrived, the Dark Sovereign had ignited a star and inherited the remnant time laws within it. Flames of jealousy shot out from the depths of his heart, wrapping around Ning Xiao and causing his eyes to turn crimson red. The heavens were far too unfair. He had bitterly pursued this for so many years, but had never seen a chance of making a breakthrough. But today he watched helplessly as the Dark Sovereign ignited a star and obtained the inheritance of the time laws. Why? Why? He couldn't accept this. He was enraged. Die. With a loud roar, Ning Xiao lifted a hand and pointed between his eyebrows. At that moment, the red up between his eyebrows rose up like a red bubble. With a light-popping sound, it burst. Roar, a heaven-shaking roar echoed through the void, carrying with it an intense desire to devour, as well as an endlessly ancient aura. Behind Ning Xiao, the phantom of a great beast appeared. Its eyes were cruel and greedy as it stubbornly locked onto Qinyu. Suddenly, the phantom of the giant beast opened its mouth wide, and the world before them fell into darkness. It was as if the world itself was about to be swallowed into its stomach at this moment. And this was the legendary, ancient, vicious beast Taotai. Within its belly was a world that could swallow and refine all things. Ning Xiao cultivated the Taotai art. Every time he swallowed a person, he could obtain a wisp of Taotai essence energy. This essence energy gathered between his eyebrows and formed that red. When necessary, he could break the red dot on his own initiative and use the essence energy of the Taotai to summon the projection of the ancient vicious beast Taotai. Although this was only a projection, it was still a terrifying existence in the legends that could swallow the heavens and earth. Ning Xiao wasn't a ruler, but he had the strength to fight one. It was also because of this that he had such confidence in himself and dared to attack in the illusion of Tang Mountain. Now that the Taotai projection had arrived, anyone below the ruler realm would be unable to escape. The Dark Sovereign would undoubtedly die. Chapter 1487. The world fell into darkness. As he saw the Taotai projection descend, ruthless killing intent gushed out from the depths of his heart, raging like a tide. At this moment, Qin Yu seemed to have encountered his mortal enemy, and this hostility, so strong that it was impossible to suppress, came from the Abyssal Titan. That's right, it was the top hunter bloodline he had obtained in the Abyss world in the past. This killing intent and hostility crossed endless space and time to arrive. It seemed that in those ancient times, the two sides were irreconcilable mortal enemies. The bloodline belonging to the Abyss Titan was restless at this moment. It kept attacking Qin Yu's mind in an attempt to gain control of his body. But at this time, Qin Yu received a reminder from the furnace. The Taotai projection, swallowing the heavens and earth, was also an excellent opportunity. No matter how powerful a fortress was, the difficulty of breaking it from the inside was far lower than attacking it from the outside. This point was also very appropriate here. Should he fight or should he listen to the furnace's reminder? Qin Yu's eyes flashed with hesitation. He took a deep breath and suppressed the restlessness of the Abyssal Titan bloodline. Bang! In the next moment, the air around him was violently drawn out, turning into an invisible current that wrapped around Qin Yu. With astonishing speed, he was sucked into the Taotai projection's gaping mouth. Everything fell into darkness. Ning Xiao frowned, surprise flashing in his eyes. Although he never doubted that he had killed the Dark Ruler, he had been swallowed by the Taotai projection without any ability to resist. However, the other party had been swallowed by the projection of the Taotai without being able to resist at all. This had exceeded his expectations. After all, he had felt a strong sense of danger from the ruler of darkness. If not for that, he would not have used his strongest technique to summon the projection of the Taotai. There had to be a problem. Perhaps the dark ruler that had been swallowed by the Taotai projection was hiding some methods. Thinking of this, Ning Zhao's eyebrows relaxed and his lips curled up in mockery. As a cultivator of the Taotai cultivation method, Ning Zhao had a clear and direct understanding of how powerful the Taotai projection was. Even a ruler realm's superpower house, once swallowed into its belly, would be suppressed by the Taotia's will and be cleanly refined. In other words, no matter what the dark ruler was planning, allowing himself to be swallowed by the Taotai projection was an extremely stupid decision. He was dead. The Taotia's belly formed its own world, and in this world, darkness and death were eternal rhythms. Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu paled. He could clearly feel the suppression coming from the Taotia's will. It was as if a mountain had suddenly collapsed and was pressing down on his chest, causing every breath to become exceptionally difficult and difficult. Following that, he fell into a trance. The circulation of his cultivation wasn't smooth either. He was like a stone statue that was gradually being frozen. At the same time, the terrifying power from the darkness was constantly breaking through his defenses and invading his body. They were like countless tiny needles. After piercing through flesh, the tips of the needles split open, revealing numerous mouths that wantonly began to devour. Of course, it didn't just devour flesh and blood. It also devoured cultivators' power, souls, and even their lives. Right now, Qin Yu was experiencing all of this with incomparable clarity. At the same time, he was withstanding the roars and struggles of his abyssal, tight-in bloodline. Being swallowed by the Taotai projection seemed to have touched its bottom line. The nobility of the abyss Titan bloodline made it unwilling to remain silent any longer. Trapped from both inside and outside, pressured from both sides, but at this time the great furnace did not move at all. After being swallowed into the belly of the Taotai projection, it fell into a silent state, its connection with Qin Yu completely cut off. Qin Yu frowned, his complexion incomparably gloomy. If it weren't for the fact that he knew that the great furnace wouldn't harm him, he would have thought that this was a trap that had been deliberately designed to target him. But even if the great furnace didn't betray him, just how long would this long silence last? Qin Yu could still withstand it for now, but he knew that there would come a time when he couldn't withstand it anymore. The great furnace, just what was it doing? Time quietly passed, just as Qin Yu felt as if he had turned into a stone, unable to withstand it any longer. A tremor spread out from his body. The long, silent great furnace seemed to awaken from its slumber. In the next moment, the great furnace descended. Its body became nearly transparent, and one could clearly see the pitch black and crimson swirling within. As they rapidly spun, they formed a black and red vortex. These were the eternal night and inextinguishable flames that the great furnace had already swallowed. Hum! The great furnace trembled. The black and red vortexes spun even faster, and an invisible aura was released from within. Within Tang Mountain's illusion, Ning Zhao stood beneath the Taotai projection, waiting for the darkness ruler to die. At this time, his complexion suddenly changed. He could feel the ice flames within his body that had been completely subdued suddenly move. It gave him a feeling as if they had received some sort of summons. What was going on? Before Ning Zhao could think more or inspect himself, he stuffily coughed, shock and alarm on his face. White flames came out of his 7 orifices and gathered together, forming a white fire snake that flew toward the Taotia's shadow. At this moment, Ning Zhao's first thought was backlash. There was no cultivation method in the world that was completely safe and without hidden dangers. In particular, the Taotai cultivation method that Ning Zhao cultivated was extremely dangerous. If he wasn't careful, there was a chance that he would be corroded by the Taotia's essence energy. It would control his mind and will, turning him into a monster that only knew how to kill and devour. Ning Zhao paled, and endless fear filled his eyes. He was so frightened that his soul nearly left his body. This was because he knew that if the Taotai projection really did suffer backlash, there was no chance he would survive. Luckily, Ning Xiao soon discovered that this wasn't the case. Rather, there was an existence within the Taotai projection that was forcefully summoning the ice flames. A sharp light exploded in Ning Xiao's eyes and his complexion paled. He instantly thought of the darkness ruler who had given up resisting and was directly swallowed. The one who did all of this must be him. There was no time to consider when the darkness ruler had discovered this, or how the ice flames within his body were forcefully summoning it. Ning Xiao roared out loud and reached out his hands, grasping at the white fire snake. This was a manifestation of the ice flames. When he obtained it in the past, it was a white fire snake. It was said that the reason Ning Xiao cultivated the Taotai cultivation method to this day was because he was cautious and his will was strong. Moreover, he was smart and never touched anyone he couldn't afford to provoke. But the truth was that the existence of the ice flames was the most crucial point. It was because of this flame that Ning Xiao was able to maintain a clear mind and calm state at all times, suppressing the influence of the Taotai cultivation method to the lowest point possible. Thus, Qinyu never imagined that his action of seizing the ice flame was, in truth, a ruthless and murderous plan for Ning Xiao to kill her. As long as he succeeded, Ning Xiao, who had lost the ice flames, would find it hard to escape the influence of the Taotai cultivation method and ultimately destroy himself. Get back here! With an angry roar, Ning Xiao grabbed the white fire snake with both hands. But after being refined for so many years, the fire snake that had always been submissive seemed to have gone mad at this time. A bone-chilling cold erupted. A layer of ice instantly formed on the surface of Ning Xiao's hands. With light cracking sounds, it covered his entire body. At the same time, more white flames wildly gushed out from Ning Xiao's orifices, sinking into the Taotai projection's mouth. Ah! Ning Xiao released his hands and roared. The layer of ice around him instantly shattered. He stared at the Taotai projection, hatred in his eyes. He could feel that the reason the darkness ruler was able to forcefully seize the ice flames was because he was inside the Taotai projection's body. This projection was summoned using the Taoqia's essence energy, and the Taoqia's essence energy existed within his body and had a direct connection with Ning Xiao himself. Now, in a situation where everything was unknown, if Ning Xiao wanted to keep the ice flames, he could only disperse the Taotai projection on his own initiative. At that time, his attempt to seize it would be interrupted, but Ning Xiao didn't dare to do so. As was said before, the Taotai art had an enormous flaw. The summoned Taotai projection seemed to be under his control, but if Ning Xiao was truly prepared to control the Taotai projection to self-destruct, there was a high chance it would cause a backlash. That would truly be certain death. Ning Xiao's eyes darkened. He fiercely clenched his teeth, a cruel light in his eyes. If you want the ice flames, then I'll give them all to you. It had to be known that it wasn't something that could be easily subdued. Regarding this, Ning Xiao, who had spent countless trials and tribulations in the past before barely managing to refine it, had rich experience and the right to speak. If you have a life to take it, then I want you to have no life to use it. As long as the darkness ruler was affected by the ice flames and Ning Xiao stimulated the Taotai projection with all his strength, he would surely die without a grave. Ning Xiao looked up at the Taotai projection. Darkness ruler, since you want the ice flames, then I will fulfill your wish. He opened his mouth. After abandoning all obstructions and resistance, the ice flames surged out like a broken dam. A complete fire snake condensed in the blink of an eye. It howled into the Taotai projection's mouth, vanishing into the darkness. Who? Ning Xiao gasped for breath, his chest heaving up and down. It was like he was placed in a steamer. His skin turned red and large beads of sweat gushed out, gathering together and dripping down. The moment he lost the ice flames, he could feel the Taoqia's law, covetous desire. In his ears, he could almost hear the Taoqia's greedy breathing. It was only at this time that Ning Xiao suddenly realized that he had already walked down the wrong path and how important the ice flames were to him. Once he lost the ice flames, it wouldn't be too long before he would be corroded by the Taoyes will and thoroughly lose himself. Thinking of this, the killing intent in Ning Xiao's eyes became even thicker. He stubbornly stared at the Taotai projection. He lifted a hand and struck his chest, spitting out a massive amount of blood. The moment the blood left his chest, it shook and shattered, turning into massive amounts of blood fog that held out and fused into the Taotai projection. Roar! As the blood fog fused into the Taotai projection, it reared its head back and roared. A cruel and destructive aura instantly shot up into the skies. Die! Die! I want you to die! Ning Xiao let out a shrill howl. His face was ferocious as black scales drilled out from the flesh on the surface of his body. A white fire snake held forwards, drilling into the furnace. It fused into the black and red vortex, causing it to become a tricolored state of black, red, and white. The furnace violently shook. It constantly expanded and shrank. Qin, you could clearly feel that it was completing some sort of transformation. Deep and heavy pounding sounds constantly emitted from the furnace. It was like countless invisible sledgehammers were constantly hammering and tempering the furnace. At the same time, the great Tao within Qin Yu's body underwent another change. Before he could feel any more, the space within the Taotai projection's belly suddenly stirred up a raging tide of destruction. A terrifying strength, crazily, wrapped around Qin Yu. It was like a high-speed spinning blade that wanted to cut him into countless pieces. The furnace had succeeded. Qin Yu no longer had a reason to suppress himself. He struggled to look up, his neck bones emitting crackling sounds. In the next moment, with an enraged roar, the terrifying abyssal titan arrived. It was 100,000 feet tall, its eyes like blazing suns. Divine light surged within it, as if countless bolts of thunder were exploding within it. The abyssal titan still looked the same as before, but the aura it exuded had undergone an astonishing change. It was more ancient, more dignified. It was like a ruler sitting high on a throne, able to pluck down the stars and moon with a raise of its hand. Chapter 1488. The Taotai projection's eyes widened. Crimson blood gushed out from its depths, cruel and cruel. It reared its head back and roared. Every scale on its body was covered in blood. Rumble, rumble. A deep and fierce, rumbling sound came from its chest. The terrifying, refining strength that belonged to the Taotai was galvanized to the limit. But at this time there was a loud bang. The Taotai projection's abdomen rapidly swelled and bulged out. The Taotai projection emitted pained roars. Dong! With another loud bang, the Taotai projection's bulging abdomen could no longer withstand the wild strength of the attack. Its bloodshot scales shattered inch by inch, turning into powder that fell to the ground. At the same time, the flesh and blood of its abdomen exploded outwards. A large hand reached out, grabbing the bloody figure and forcefully squeezing it out. The Abyss Titan used this incomparably cruel and bloody method to force its way out. No, it didn't just force its way out. The Abyss Titan's other hand grabbed onto the other side of the Taotai projection's horrifying wound. With a loud roar, it gathered strength, wanting to tear it in half. Ah! Ning Xiao grabbed his head with both hands and screamed out in pain. Blood flowed out from his head. Pa! With a light sound, like a popping bubble, the Taotai projection vanished. The earth violently rumbled and space wildly twisted. The Abyss Titan's massive body that supported the heavens fell to the ground. Pitter-patter. This was the sound of flesh and blood being torn apart. Ning Xiao held his head with both hands. At this time his body was like an inflated balloon, rapidly inflating at a speed visible to the naked eye. The sound he heard now was because his flesh and blood were growing too fast, and the surface of his body was constantly being torn apart. A skinless, blood-drenched, terrifying beast appeared in front of everyone. using his body as a medium to grow and appear in front of everyone. This was the true Taotai. It wasn't complete, but it possessed the Taoqia's essence energy and gave birth to a flesh and blood body. It also possessed the Taoqia's inextinguishable will to swallow and destroy. Roar! The Taotai reared its head back and roared. It stubbornly stared at Qin Yu, its giant eyes filled with a wild, killing intent. Its feet fell down, and its massive body rushed forwards. Its speed was astonishing, and in the blink of an eye it arrived in front of the Abyss Titan. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, without the slightest probing or contact, the two enormous beasts brazenly fought each other. It abandoned its terrifying ability to devour the heavens and the earth, as if the Taotai itself knew very well that the power it possessed was not enough to harm the Abyssal Titan. Just now, his projection had been forcefully broken, and he had charged out of the world in his stomach. This was the best proof of this. The furious roars were like claps of thunder. Every collision and attack caused the surrounding world to tremble violently, and the shock waves spread outwards at an astonishing speed. A young man in an embroidered robe was sitting cross-legged. Even though he was trying his best to stabilize his state of mind, one could still see the unconcealable ecstasy on his face, because he had found the star that suited him. Without the slightest hesitation, the young man in embroidered robes mobilized his entire divine sense and poured it into the star. Hum! Hum! A slight tremor erupted from within the star. The embroidered robed youth revealed a look of ecstasy, because it was about to ignite. Once he succeeded, he would be able to make use of this opportunity to illuminate his path of cultivation and break through to the sovereign realm. Suddenly the earth trembled. Then it grew stronger and stronger, causing the surrounding space to distort. The youth's complexion changed again and again. This was because, as the environment around him began to shake, the connection he had just established with the star was forcefully broken apart. In fact, as the illusory world of Mount Tang distorted, the star began to shift. He was about to lose track of this star. No. With an angry roar, the youth spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared blankly at the shaking space in front of him, his face twisting. Who is it? With a loud roar, the youth shot into the skies, howling towards the source of the fluctuations of strength. His eyes turned red, and he clenched his fists within his sleeves. He swore in his heart that no matter who caused all of this, they would all die. If cutting off one's path to wealth was the same as killing one's parents, then to the youth in embroidered robes, the fact that his burning of the star had been interrupted was the same as ruining his lucky chance to enter Mount Tang's illusory world. Such a deep hatred far surpassed that of cutting off one's path to wealth. The resentment and anger in his heart could be imagined. But very quickly, the youth in embroidered robes, who was overbearing and seething with killing intent in his heart, stopped with a pale face. The illusory world of Mount Tang where he was now was distorting violently, and the terrifying fluctuations of strength were like tempestuous waves that ceaselessly and violently assaulted him. Being within it, he was like a lonely little boat that might be overturned at any moment before being smashed into bits. The anger and killing intent in his heart were completely extinguished under the assault of the storm of strength, and only trembling and fear remained. The youth in embroidered robes was also on the list to enter the imperial tomb of the western barbaric lands. In fact, he was only a substitute, but as the imperial palace confirmed that someone had been eliminated, he replaced the vacancy. Of course, truthfully speaking, the youth in embroidered robes came from an extraordinary background. Originally, he wasn't willing to get involved in this mess. After all, the top figures of the empire had long since heard of the matter of the imperial tomb of the western barbaric lands. But right after the opening of the illusory world of Mount Tang, as the top cultivation, holy land of the western wilderness, it was equivalent to half a ticket to the sovereign realm. The entry quota was extremely precious, and it wasn't something that could be obtained easily. It was precisely because of this that the youth in embroidered robes finally gritted his teeth and agreed to become a member of the official list. But now everything was ruined. If he continued forward, not to mention looking for trouble with them, he was afraid that if he wasn't careful, he would be implicated and killed on the spot. Wanting to cry, but having no tears, the youth in embroidered robes turned around and retreated. And at this moment, in different directions, many people had made the same decision as the youth in embroidered robes. As they retreated, they cursed in their hearts. I've really suffered 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Why did I enter the illusory world of Mount Tang with these 2 idiots? The illusory world of Mount Tang was one of the top cultivation, holy lands of the western wilderness. The illusory world of Mount Tang. Anyone who entered here didn't seize every second to cultivate for fear of wasting even a little time. But these 2 actually ran into the illusory world of Mount Tang to fight, stirring up a pool of water and causing them to be implicated. And the most tragic thing was that these 2 fellows that seemed extremely stupid to them were actually far stronger than them. Not just a little, but a lot. So much that they didn't dare to retaliate and could only swallow their anger and turn around and leave. Since they couldn't afford to provoke them, then they could only hide. Fortunately, the illusory world of Mount Tang was big enough. Now, they only hoped that, in the remaining time, they could still gain something. Blood Flag was also one of them. He frowned slightly, and his eyes revealed a serious look. He stared at the violently twisting heaven and earth in front of him, and at the indistinct figures fighting against each other. In fact, Blood Flag had entered deeper than everyone else and had already reached the core area of the battlefield. A faint layer of blood light covered the surface of his body, isolating the terrifying crushing and tearing power of the outside world. Just this alone was sufficient to prove the extremely shocking strength of the Blood Flag. He licked the corner of his mouth, and his eyes became serious, revealing a bit of heat. Killing strong cultivators was a strong temptation for him, not only because of the distortion in his mind, but also because it was a form of cultivation for him. The more people he killed, the stronger the cultivator he killed, and the greater the harvest he could obtain. But in the end, after thinking about it again and again, he still chose to retreat. The reason was very simple. Blood Flag didn't have absolute confidence that he could kill the 2 cultivators in front of him, who obviously had a powerful variant bloodline. And soon, they would set off for the western savages. Getting injured at this time was obviously not a wise choice. He turned and left. Blood Flag was decisive. His figure vanished into the twisting world, quickly vanishing from sight. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't think about being the fisherman that reaped the benefits in the end. But when he broke into this place, he had already been discovered by the 2 terrifying figures fighting against each other. It would have been fine if he had just peeked and left. But if he really wanted to reap the benefits in the end, he feared he would be the first to suffer the combined attacks of these 2 titans. No one was an idiot, but in truth, Blood Flag had miscalculated this time. This was because he didn't know that the Taotia's mind had already been occupied by the desire to devour and slaughter, and it had already lost all rational judgment. Right now, the only thing it wanted to do was kill the Abyssal Titan. Kill this great enemy that had been its fated enemy since ancient times. Correspondingly, even though the Abyssal Titan bloodline was nearly combusting, Qin Yu still managed to maintain a trace of clarity in his mind. He sensed the arrival of Blood Flag, and a great deal of worry rose in his heart. Ning Zhao's strength had surpassed his expectations, and the appearance of Blood Flag was also outside of his plans. Luckily, Blood Flag had retreated. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. It wasn't hard to guess the reason for Blood Flag's retreat. Although he relaxed a little, he didn't let go of his guard against him. It wasn't until he was certain that Blood Flag had gone far away that he truly relaxed. Luckily, Blood Flag had been scared away by his own caution. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble today. But this also gave Qin Yu a great deal of vigilance. The disturbance he had caused today had been far too great. Since Blood Flag might arrive, there might be other troubles ahead. Thus, he had to finish this battle quickly and kill off the Tao Tai in the shortest time possible. And at this time, Qin Yu could clearly feel some changes occurring within the abyssal titan's body. No, it should be said that after absorbing the cold ice flames, the furnace had completely transformed. It was tempering the great Tao within Qin Yu's body, making it match the attributes of the abyssal titan. It was like the incomparably formidable abyssal titan had been injected with its own great Tao. Qin Yu didn't know what this meant, but there was one thing he was certain of. The abyssal titan had become even stronger. Dong, with a loud explosion, the two vicious beasts that had been fighting each other suddenly separated from the middle. The enormous body of the Tao Tai was like a kite with a broken string, flying backwards in an incomparably miserable manner. Bang! The ground wailed and shattered. The abyssal titan howled as it approached, punching out its fist. The Tao Tai howled in pain. Its body flew upwards as it was smashed into the skies. In the next moment, the skies turned dark. The abyssal titan's figure blocked out the light above. Then, like a mountain falling from the highest heavens, it smashed into the Tao Ye's body. Rumble, rumble. At this moment, the world seemed to collapse. Chapter 1489. The earth caved in, forming a massive pit. The Tao Tai fell down, its chest caved in, and its massive body gradually stopped struggling. Large wounds opened up between its flesh and blood. Blood gushed out, filling every crack in its body. The pungent smell of blood filled the air. Crimson aura seeped out from the Tao Tai's body and dissipated into the world. The abyssal titan stood up. It reared its head back and roared. It lifted a hand and grasped forward. Bang! The already violently shaking illusory space began to crazily compress and collapse. A faintly discernible crimson aura appeared in the collapsing space. This was the aura that had seeped out from the Tao Ye's body. Roar! A furious roar echoed in everyone's ears. In the collapsing and shrinking space behind the crimson aura, a massive phantom appeared. Its appearance was exactly the same as the Tao Tai that had been killed by the abyssal titan at the bottom of the pit. Or, to be more precise, it was the true Tao Tai, as an ancient vicious beast that could swallow the world. Even if its flesh and blood body died, its will would still exist in the world. In fact, if there was a suitable opportunity, it could even revive, for instance, right now, when Ningxiao suffered a backlash from the Tao Tai's projection and used his body as a shell to create a new body. Even if its body wasn't complete and couldn't maintain its existence, if it could kill the abyssal titan and swallow this mortal enemy, it might truly revive. And the foundation of the Tao Tai's continued existence was the Tao Tai essence energy mentioned before. This was the crimson aura that was trying to escape but was blocked by the abyssal titan. For the Tao Tai, Ning Zhao's death was at most a loss. A believer or a backup body to seize wasn't a big deal. But the Tao Tai essence energy could not be lost. Even if it was lost, it would forever lose a portion of its strength. Because of this, when the Tao Tai sensed the abyssal titan's attack and wanted to seize the essence energy, the Tao Tai's will descended. For the Tao Tai that had died and its will scattered in the heavens, forcefully gathering its will before it could revive was a tremendous burden. In other words, even if the abyssal titan gave up, it would still be a tremendous blow to the Tao Tai. At least, if it wanted to revive, the difficulty would increase. But the abyssal titan wasn't willing to give up. Qin, you could clearly feel the restlessness of the titan bloodline in his body. It was filled with a strong determination to obtain the Tao Tai's essence energy. It wasn't just hatred between them, but a restlessness that came from the bloodline itself, and Qin Yu easily understood the meaning behind this restlessness. If he could obtain the essence energy of the Tao Tai and swallow it, the abyssal titan strength would rise dramatically. Should he stop while he was ahead, or should he fight with the Tao Tai again? Qin Yu hesitated for a moment before he steeled his resolve. Although the abyss titan bloodline did not seem that important to him on the surface, the battle with the Tao Tai today showed that this judgment was clearly wrong. Since the abyssal titans could become life and death enemies with the terrifying ancient vicious beast Tao Tai, this was enough to prove their astonishing potential. After all, in order to become mortal enemies, both parties had to be on the same level in terms of strength. Otherwise, they would have all been killed long ago. There would have been no need for the hatred between them to continue for countless years. If he could seize the Tao Che's essence energy, perhaps he would have an unexpected harvest, of course. The impending opening of the Western barbaric imperial tomb, as well as the urgency and unease he felt about the future, were also strong conditions that made Qin Yu unwilling to give up any chance to increase his strength. Then let's give it a try. Let's see how powerful the remnant, undying will of the Tao Tai is. The Abyss Titan roared. It reached out a giant claw and fiercely pulled back. After being tempered in the furnace, its body had completely harmonized with its great Tao. With a light hum, it released all of its strength. Pitter-patter. At this moment, the Abyss Titan's body that supported the heavens and earth began to expand at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, it grew even larger. A dark golden ring appeared in the depths of its eyes, exuding an endless majestic aura. Space was being annihilated. After collapsing to the extreme, endless destruction followed. Darkness appeared, like ink falling into clear water. It rapidly dissolved and spread, causing pure darkness to spread outwards at a speed visible to the naked eye. The scarlet Tao Che's essence energy that escaped into the void suddenly became clearer and was forcefully pulled back. It was like a large fish that had fallen into a black net. No matter how much they struggled, they couldn't escape. The Tao Tai roared. Its deep and oppressive voice transmitted endless anger and cruelty. Its crimson eyes locked onto the Abyss Titan, revealing a deep killing intent and hatred. Qin Yu's heart chilled. He felt as if he had fallen into an icy lake and would soon be frozen solid. He saw the Tao Tai open its great maw and ruthlessly swallow forward. The endless pitch-black, scarlet Tao Che's essence energy emitted clear, cracking sounds. It howled away, rushing into the Tao Che's mouth. In just half a breath of time, it would be able to escape from its imprisonment. He had failed. Qin Yu was unwilling in his heart as well as a strong restlessness. Through today's matters, he had already offended this Tao Tai. Being hated by an ancient era's ferocious beast that would never truly die and might come back to life at any time was clearly an extremely dangerous thing. But this was reality. Everyone had to make choices, and they had to bear the consequences of their choices. Roar! The Abyss Titan angrily roared. Its muscles and bones tightened and its arms bulged out. Because it used too much strength, its scales shattered and its skin cracked, forming massive wounds. But this didn't change the fact that the Tao Che's essence energy was about to escape. Was there a way? Of course there was. At this moment, Qin Yu thought of the East Sea sword, but this thought only appeared for a moment before it was suppressed. Not to mention whether or not this sword could smoothly seize the Tao Che's essence energy, and even if it succeeded, what would happen next? It had to be known that with Qin Yu's current condition and the intensity of his great Tao after being tempered once more, if it collapsed, just how long would it take to repair it? If the Western Desolate discovered that something was wrong, wouldn't they have to offer up their heads with both hands? Even if he smoothly passed and didn't reveal any flaws, how would he deal with the incident in the Western Desolate imperial tomb? Humph, humph. Being impulsive was not good. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed all thoughts in his mind. He had already obtained the ice flame today and completed his goal. Even if he gave up on the Tao Che's essence energy, he would still have a great harvest. As for the Tao Che's hatred, that was something that would happen in the future. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before this ancient, vicious beast would no longer be a threat to him. But things in this world were often so wonderful. Qin Yu had already decided to let it go, but things happened again. There was a turning point. And the source of this turning point was the stone pagoda. At first, when Qin Yu entered the Tang Mountain illusion and had yet to ignite the Star of Time, the stone pagoda squeezed in and said that it wanted to try. Afterwards, the stone pagoda projection disappeared without a trace. Qin Yu first concentrated on accepting the gift from the Star of Time. Then Ning Shao came to kill him, and the Taotai appeared in a great battle. He was so busy that he actually forgot the existence of the stone pagoda. But in fact, as Qinyu fell into a great battle and fought with the Taotai, the stone pagoda didn't hide itself, but because its attempt had succeeded. It wasn't until this moment, when the Taochies arrived and tried to take away all the Taochies' essence energy, that the stone pagoda was finally able to free itself. At this moment, the Tang Mountain illusion that had been severely corroded by the darkness and the Taochies had arrived, causing it to tremble. It was as if a boulder had fallen onto the surface of a calm lake and set off waves that roared in all directions. The speed was astonishing. In the blink of an eye, it had swept through every corner of the surroundings. And what was even more shocking than its speed was that these waves contained a formidable strength that could suppress all. Star after star appeared in the world of perception. In a completely different manner, they broke into everyone's eyes. They released light, and their auras linked together, forming a terrifying shackle that covered the Taochies' will. It also imprisoned the Taochies' essence energy that was about to sink into its mouth. The stone pagoda appeared above the shackle, its voice filled with excitement. Success! It actually succeeded. It seemed that the scene in front of it had far surpassed its expectations. A trace of astonishment flashed in the Abyss Titan's eyes, but it quickly turned into excitement. With a roar, it stomped heavily on the ground, and its enormous body that was like a mountain shot into the sky, pouncing toward the Taochies that was sealed under the shackles. A giant claw reached out and grabbed a strand of Taochies' essence energy. It violently pulled it back and forcefully shoved it into its mouth. Its sharp teeth flashed with a cold light. It constantly opened and closed, emitting scalp-numbing chewing sounds. Finally, it swallowed the Taochies' essence energy. Roar! The Taotai angrily roared. Its eyes were blood-red, as if they would drip out at any moment. A terrifying aura broke out from its body like an erupting volcano, wildly impacting the surrounding shackles. The stars that appeared in the world of perception began to release increasingly dazzling light. As the Taotai resisted, it began to tremble. The stone pagoda roared, "Hurry, I can't last much longer!" The abyssal titan reached out its hands, each grabbing a strand of Taochies' essence energy. Without even chewing it, it swallowed it whole. Then it continued. The Taochies' roars became increasingly shrill and angry. "Kacha! Kacha!" The sounds of shattering began to emit from the shining stars. Bang! The first star exploded, followed by the second. The third, the entire shackle was forcefully broken apart. The Taochies was filled with hatred. It glared at the abyssal titan and swallowed the last 2 strands of crimson Taochies' essence energy before vanishing from sight. Rumble, rumble. Endless waves surged out like a tsunami. With the battlefield as the center, they erupted in all directions, blotting out the skies. This was the result of a massive number of stars shattering, causing the Tang Mountain illusion to be damaged. Chapter 1490. This was probably the first time in the history of the West Wilderness that the illusion of Mount Tang had ended so hastily. A large number of stars shattered, triggering a chain reaction that caused the entire Mount Tang illusion to be in turmoil. In this state, all the cultivators who entered were forcefully expelled. It was said that on that day, countless people roared at the sky, their roars filled with endless resentment. The initial commotion caused by the Abyss Titan and Taochies battle had long since alarmed many people. Soon, information regarding this aspect surged like a tide in the dark. Even though they weren't absolutely sure, the fact that the Mountain Tang Mirage closed ahead of time definitely had something to do with them. At this moment, everyone's eyes were filled with killing intent. There was only one thought in their minds: find the culprit. In the palace, Li Zhou Yi's face was ashen as he hurried over. Perhaps others didn't know, but he saw through the truth with a glance. Because Ning Shao was dead. If someone told him that this had nothing to do with the chief sovereign of darkness, he would be the first to refuse to believe it. However, the problem was that the illusion of Mount Tang was a world of its own. The area within it was extremely vast. After entering, everyone would be scattered all over the place. The probability of them meeting each other was extremely low. Also, all of the cultivators who entered the illusion of Mount Tang were focused on cultivation and did not care about anything else. Therefore, for many years, there had never been such a terrible incident like today in the illusion of Mount Tang. The ruler of darkness is only pretending to obey, but acting in secret? Or was Ning Xiao unwilling to give up? Although the result was already set, this question was still very important to Li Yizhou. Saint Zhou Yan waited outside and bowed. "Your Highness," Li Yizhou said solemnly, "how is it?" Saint Zhou Yan said, "The ruler of darkness aura is stable, he should be fine." Li Yizhou's heart relaxed slightly. With his current situation, coupled with the pressing time, it was impossible for him to change the candidates. If the Dark Ruler was injured, the matter of the Western barbaric imperial mausoleum would be over. At least it's not the worst. Taking a deep breath, Li Yizhou stepped into the room. "Without my orders, no one is allowed to enter." Sage Zhou Yan bowed and acknowledged. In the room, Qin Yu opened his eyes. He stood up and cupped his hands together. "Greetings, Your Highness." Li Zhouyi said, "Hegemon of Darkness, let me ask you, does anyone else know about what happened in the Mount Tang illusion?" Black's roar paused for a moment before it replied calmly, "No." This was an admission. Although the two of them did not point out exactly what they were talking about, they both knew what it was. Li Yizhou's complexion relaxed a little. First, no one knew that Qin Yu had killed Ning Xiao, and second, Qin Yu's frank attitude. Taking a deep breath, he asked, "What happened?" Qin Yu said, "After entering Tang Mountain's illusionary realm, I was cultivating as fast as I could. I don't know why, but Ning Xiao seems to be able to lock onto my position." After making some embellishments, he told the entire story. Li Yizhou's heart relaxed again. It was Ning Xiao who took the initiative to attack him, which meant that the ruler of darkness was still controllable. He didn't have any autonomous thoughts that he shouldn't have. Of course, the Sixth Highness wouldn't easily believe Qin Yu. The reason he didn't doubt Qin Yu was because, in his opinion, the Dark Ruler didn't have the ability to do this. Without his help, how could the Dark Dominator, who was isolated and helpless in the imperial capital, lock onto Ning Xiao's position in the illusion of Mount Tang? On the other hand, if Ning Xiao could obtain the help of the Great Princess and make some preparations, she might have been able to accomplish this. Frowning, Li Yizhou revealed a heavy expression. It is impossible for Ning Xiao to accomplish what happened within the illusion of Mount Tang alone. The Great Princess likely participated. Now that Ning Xiao is dead, it will be easy for her to guess that it was you who did it. As he spoke, his complexion became increasingly gloomy. It was said before that the number of spots to enter Mount Tang's illusion was in fact extremely limited. As long as one was able to obtain one, they were extraordinary individuals. Either they were extraordinary themselves, or they came from extraordinary backgrounds. But no matter what the situation was, it meant that their interests had been touched upon and a great storm would be set off. To put it bluntly, the current imperial capital was like a pot of boiling oil. Almost everyone wanted to find the main culprit behind the destruction of MT Tang's illusionary realm. If this matter was revealed to be related to Qin Yu, Li Yizhou could imagine that this broken drum that was leaking wind in all directions would be beaten until the heavens shook. That feeling would surely be sour to the extreme. Qin Yu observed Li Yizhou's expression, and it wasn't hard to guess what he was thinking. His eyes flashed beneath his black robes. He calmly said, "Your Highness, rest assured. Even if the Great Princess learns of this matter, she won't reveal anything." From Li Yizhou's perspective, Qin Yu said, "This is because, compared to Your Highness, the Great Princess doesn't want to take risks, and she also doesn't want to bear the consequences of this matter." Although his words sounded a little unpleasant, the logic behind them was very clear. Li Yizhou slowly nodded. The Great Princess was beautiful and cold. Her entire body seemed to be covered in ice. It was the Dark Ruler. Her voice was calm, as if she didn't reveal any strange emotions because Ning Xiao had been killed. Even if he had been selected to enter the Western savage lands and participate in the struggle for the rare treasure of the savage race, a young man stood tall below. This person had an extraordinary bearing. Even in front of the first princess, who was a descendant of the royal family, he was still somewhat calm. An evil heretical cultivator that cultivates the Tao Tai art. His death isn't worth pitying. The only thing that is hateful is that he ruined the following matters. Your Highness will need to make further arrangements in the Western savage lands. The youth swept his eyes over the indifferent great princess. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Since we have determined that this was the Dark Ruler's doing, can we use this opportunity to place down another piece? His Highness is surrounded by enemies from all sides. We only need to release a bit of news, and he will be beyond redemption." The great princess shook her head. "No." The youth said, "Princess has considered everything carefully. We must prevent them from fighting to the death and affecting your Highness's future plans." The great princess' eyes fell onto him. The hall fell silent. The youth frowned. He thought for a moment and said, "I am willing to replace Ning Xiao and go to the Western savage lands. But my father may not agree to this." The great princess said, "I will solve this matter." After a pause, she said, "Yuan Gu, I want you to return to the imperial capital alive." The youth revealed a smile. His eyes bloomed with endless confidence. "With princess words, I will definitely return." The imperial capital was like a barrel of gunpowder. There was still no way to vent. Although Ning Xiao's death had aroused many people's suspicions without evidence, no one dared to provoke the great princess. After all, she was now considered one of the most powerful competitors for the throne. No one wanted to provoke such a person. Perhaps one day she would be able to soar up the branches and transform into the imperial phoenix, a descendant of the heavens, as her enemy. Some people tried to inquire about the situation from the great princess in private, but after being directly rejected, all movements vanished without a trace. But anger still burned in their chests. Everyone who had their lucky chances ruined was waiting for the main culprit to appear. They believed that this person was in the group, and that this group would leave the imperial capital today. There was no send-off scene. Everything was carried out in a state of secrecy. All the cultivators on the list were gathered in an ordinary residence in the imperial capital. The ground had been hollowed out and a fortress had been built. Deep within the layers of security, there was a transmission array that was in a dormant state. At this time, as strength poured in, the dark runes of the array lit up one after another, gradually releasing a dazzling light. Hum, hum. Strong spatial fluctuations spread out from within. A low and obscure aura caused everyone's expression to become solemn. At this moment, there were at most 2 or 3 people in the group who knew where they would be going. Qin Yu was one of them. It could even be said that out of everyone present, he was the one who understood the ins and outs of this matter the most, as well as the degree of danger. The Western savage imperial tomb was a rare treasure of the barbarians. It could give birth to a powerful half-step sovereign step treasure. Even though there were countless powerhouses in the desolate region, a half-step sovereign was still enough to shake an entire country. Every newly born half-step sovereign could directly increase the strength of a country and even increase the authority of a country in the entire desolate region. If so, then it could be understood why the Western savage imperial tomb placed such importance on this matter. Because they already knew about this and were mentally prepared, they were naturally much calmer. Thus, Qin Yu discovered a new face. Yuan Gu. This name was quite good, and he believed that his strength would also be pleasantly surprised. After all, this was the person who had come to replace Ning Xiao after her death. Although this person's eyes hadn't stopped on his black robes since he appeared, Qin Yu was well aware that the two sides were like fire and water from the very start. Then he sensed that the aura from the blood flag hadn't even left the Western savage imperial capital and had already made two powerful enemies. It seemed that this trip to the Western savage imperial tomb was destined to not be peaceful. But at this moment, deep in Qin Yu's heart, he didn't feel any fear or unease. There was only a deep tranquility, and the essence of this tranquility was self-confidence. This confidence came from a cultivator's own strength. The illusion of Tang Mountain had been destroyed. Everyone's anger soared to the heavens. They wished they could find the main culprit and tear him to shreds. But the truth was that the main culprit had eaten so much that his mouth was dripping with oil. The Time Star was one, the Ice Flames were the second, and the Tao Tai Essence energy was the third. Now that Qin Yu's Tao of Time had made great progress, he could use it at a critical moment as one of his true trump cards. After the Great Furnace swallowed the Ice Flames, it completed a further transformation, causing the great Tao within Qin Yu's body to rise along with it. There was an inconceivable, yet wonderful change. As for the Tao Tai Essence energy, it directly strengthened the strength of the Abyssal Titan. Even now, he could clearly feel that his Titan bloodline was constantly becoming stronger. And this was only Qin Yu's own intuitive harvests. Although he didn't have any concrete evidence, his intuition told him that the greatest harvest in the illusion of Tang Mountain should have come from the Stone Pagoda's attempt. However, regarding this, the Stone Pagoda only said that it needed time to prepare. As for when it would be completed, it was still unknown. But Qin Yu believed that in the near future, the Stone Pagoda would surely give him a great, pleasant surprise. This fellow was indeed reliable. It hadn't failed to live up to his trust. The transmission array has opened. Hurry and enter. Remember, everything that happens next is a top secret of the Western savage. Do not reveal anything to anyone. A loud shout interrupted Qin Yu's thoughts. He took a deep breath and followed behind everyone. As he stepped in, a strong spatial distortion struck him. In the next moment, everything in front of him shattered, like a mirror that had been smashed to the ground.